The scent came first. Pine and earth mingled with something metallic. Then sound returned, distant howls carrying on the wind, vibrating through his bones like a forgotten melody. Hayden Pierce opened his eyes to unfamiliar stone walls and wooden beams crossing a vaulted ceiling. His fingers clutched at sheets that weren't his own, in a room he had never seen before. His heart hammered against his ribs as he tried to piece together where he was and how he'd gotten here. The last thing he remembered was driving along the mountain pass, searching for any sign of his mother who had vanished 3 years ago. The storm had been relentless, rain lashing at his windshield, visibility reduced to nearly nothing. Then those eyes in the darkness, golden, feral, intelligent. The sudden swerve of his steering wheel, the world spinning, then nothing but darkness, until now. Hayden sat up slowly, wincing at the dull ache in his temples. Sunlight streamed through tall, arched windows, illuminating dancing dust motes in the air. The room was spacious yet austere, with heavy wooden furniture and neutral colors. A large painting of a moonlit forest hung on the far wall, depicting a pack of wolves running through silver-dappled trees. A glass of water sat on the nightstand beside a small silver pendant shaped like a crescent moon. The pendant seemed to call to him, familiar in a way he couldn't place. Hayden reached for it, his fingers trembling as they closed around the cool metal. His mother had worn something similar, hadn't she? Before she disappeared into these very mountains, leaving behind nothing but unanswered questions. Voices approached from beyond the heavy oak door. Hayden quickly slipped the pendant into the pocket of the oversized shirt he was wearing, clothes that weren't his either, and swung his legs over the edge of the bed. He'd spent 15 years in special forces before retiring to search for his mother, and his instincts were screaming that he was in unknown territory. "He's awake," a deep voice said from the hallway. Not a question, but a statement of fact. The door swung open, and a weathered man with silver-streaked dark hair entered, followed by 2 others. Their movements were fluid, almost predatory, as they assessed him. Though they wore ordinary clothes, something about them seemed distinctly untamed. "You're safe," the older man said, his voice carrying authority without warmth. "I'm Thorn, pack healer." "Pack healer?" Hayden's voice sounded foreign to his own ears, raspy and uncertain. He catalogued potential escape routes automatically, a habit from his military days. "Silverblood territory," Thorn continued, his piercing blue eyes never leaving Hayden's face. "Alexei found you after your car crashed. You smell different now." Hayden blinked, confusion washing over him. "Excuse me?" One of the others, a younger man with scars tracking down his neck, leaned forward and inhaled deeply. "He's right. You're not what you were before the accident." The third visitor, a woman with eyes like amber, stepped closer. "You're an Omega now." The word hung in the air between them. Omega. It should have meant nothing to Hayden, should have sounded like nonsense, yet something deep within him recognized it, responded to it like a name he'd forgotten he had. "I don't understand," Hayden said, fingers curling around the edge of the mattress. "What happened to me? What's an Omega?" Thorn's expression softened marginally. "The accident changed you. Sometimes trauma can trigger a dormant shift in humans with certain ancestral connections." His mother's face flashed in Hayden's memory. Her warnings about these mountains, about the full moon, about staying away. Warnings he'd ignored when he'd finally gathered enough courage to search for her. "You're saying I'm what? A werewolf?" The words felt ridiculous leaving his lips. Yet the 3 exchanged glances that sent ice through his veins. "Your mother never told you about your lineage, did she?" Thorn asked quietly. Hayden's breath caught. "You knew my mother?" "Everyone knew Elizabeth," the scarred man said, his voice dropping an octave. "She was supposed to join the council before she fled." The room seemed to tilt around Hayden. His mother, quiet, gentle, always looking over her shoulder, had been part of this, part of them. "An Omega is rare," the amber-eyed woman continued, something like envy coloring her tone. "The peacekeeper, the heart of the pack. You'll feel others' emotions, calm their storms." "I don't want to feel anyone's emotions," Hayden said, standing abruptly. "I want answers about my mother, and then I want to go home." The 3 exchanged glances again. this time with unmistakable tension. "That's not possible," Thorn said flatly. "The change is irreversible, and unmated omegas are too valuable to leave unprotected." "Unmated?" The word sent a chill down Hayden's spine. "I'm not something to be claimed. I'm a person." A commotion arose outside. Voices raised, heavy footfalls, something between urgency and deference in the tones. The three visitors stiffened simultaneously, their attention snapping to the door. "He's coming," the amber-eyed woman whispered, something like fear or awe in her voice. "He must have sensed his awakening." "Who?" Hayden demanded, but he could already feel it, a presence approaching like an oncoming storm, heavy and electric. Every hair on his body stood on end as something primal inside him responded, like a tuning fork struck at precisely the right frequency. "Alexei," Thorn answered, stepping aside as the footsteps grew louder. "The Alpha King." The door burst open, and the world seemed to stop. He filled the doorframe completely, tall and broad, with midnight hair threaded with silver at the temples, and eyes like winter storms. Power radiated from him in palpable waves that made the air thick and heavy. A jagged scar ran from his right eye to his jaw, somehow making his severe beauty more striking rather than marring it. But it wasn't his imposing presence that stole Hayden's breath. It was the way his silver gaze locked onto his with immediate recognition. Hungry and possessive, yet tinged with something that looked almost like relief. "Mine," he growled. The single word reverberated through the room and settled into Hayden's bones like it had always belonged there. The pendant in his pocket seemed to burn against his thigh. The others in the room had lowered their eyes and backed away, creating space between them as Alexei stepped forward. "You don't even know me," Hayden whispered, fighting the inexplicable pull he felt toward this stranger. Alexei's lips curved into something too sharp to be a smile. "I've known you were mine since the moment you crossed into my territory 3 days ago. I've been waiting for you to wake up." He reached out, his fingertips hovering just shy of Hayden's face. "Waiting for you to become what you were always meant to be." Hayden stepped back, bumping against the bed frame. "I'm not yours. I'm not anyone's. I came here looking for my mother, not whatever this is." Something flashed in Alexei's eyes. Surprise, perhaps even respect at his defiance. Behind him, Hayden heard Thorn's sharp intake of breath. No one denied the Alpha, his reaction seemed to say. "Elizabeth's son," Alexei said thoughtfully. "That explains much." His gaze trailed over Hayden, assessing, calculating. "But not everything." Before Hayden could respond, the floor beneath them trembled. Shouts erupted from somewhere outside, urgent and alarmed. Alexei's posture changed instantly, all his focus shifting from Hayden to the threat. "Border breach," he growled to Thorn. His entire demeanor shifted to that of a commander expecting immediate compliance. "Iron Tooth?" Thorn asked, already moving. "Worse." Alexei's jaw tightened. "Magnus himself. He must have sensed him too." His gaze cut back to Hayden, intense and burning. "They cannot have him." The possessiveness in his voice should have angered Hayden, but something else overrode that feeling. The unmistakable scent of fear permeating the room, not from Alexei, but from the others. Even as newly awakened as he was, Hayden could sense their terror at the mention of Magnus. "What's happening?" Hayden asked, his voice steadier than he felt. Alexei's expression darkened. "War." He reached for Hayden again, and this time his warm fingers wrapped around his wrist, sending a shock of sensation up his arm. "And you've just become its most valuable prize." Hayden wanted to pull away, to run, to reject everything about this impossible situation. But the pendant in his pocket seemed to pulse in time with his heartbeat, and some new instinct whispered that he'd been searching his entire life for answers about his mother, about himself. Maybe it was time to finally face what had been hidden from him. As Alexei pulled him toward the door, toward the sound of chaos unfolding, one certainty crystallized in Hayden's mind. Nothing would ever be the same again. He'd awoken as an Omega in a world of wolves and predators, and somehow the most dangerous of them all had already decided he belonged to him. What Alexei didn't know was that Hayden had spent a lifetime in war zones, had survived missions that had claimed better men. If he was truly his mother's son, then perhaps he had more strength than any of them realized. He felt Alexei's gaze on him as they moved through the doorway, his grip firm but not painful. "Stay close to me," he commanded softly. And despite every rational thought screaming against it, Hayden did. The corridor outside his room bustled with activity, people rushing past with purpose, some carrying weapons, others shifting before his eyes into forms that made his breath catch. Halfway human, halfway wolf, their bodies contorted in a transformation that should have been impossible, yet somehow seemed fluid and natural. Alexei's hand remained firmly around Hayden's wrist as he guided him through the chaos, his body a shield between him and everyone else. The contact sent waves of warmth up Hayden's arm, strange and intimate. He could feel Alexei's pulse through his fingertips, steady and strong, betraying none of the urgency around them. "The safe room," Alexei commanded to a burly man who appeared at his side. "Prepare it." "Already done, Alpha," the man responded, his gaze flickering curiously to Hayden before dropping respectfully. They descended a grand staircase into what appeared to be the main hall of an enormous castle. Exposed beams crossed the high ceiling, and a massive stone fireplace dominated one wall. Through tall windows, Hayden caught glimpses of forest and mountains beyond, and figures racing between the trees, some on 2 legs, others on 4. "What exactly is happening?" Hayden asked, struggling to keep pace with Alexei's long strides. "Magnus Irontooth has been our enemy for generations," Alexei replied without slowing. "He wants what isn't his. He always has. And that includes you now." The reality of his situation was still settling in, surreal and dreamlike. Alexei stopped abruptly, turning to face him. People continued to move around them, but they gave them a wide berth, as if an invisible force field surrounded the Alpha. "An Omega hasn't been born into any pack for over 50 years, he said, his voice low. "You're not just rare, you're nearly mythical. Your presence strengthens the pack bonds, brings stability, peace." His eyes darkened. For a pack like Irontooth, ruled by cruelty and fear, an Omega would be a weapon. "I'm not a weapon," Hayden said firmly. "I'm not a prize. I'm lost." "Searching for your mother," Alexei finished for him, something gentler crossing his severe features. "I know." The mention of his mother refocused Hayden. "You said everyone knew her. Is she—" A tremendous crash interrupted them as the massive front doors of the castle burst open. A group of bloodied warriors staggered in, carrying an injured pack member between them. The scent of blood hit Hayden like a physical force, and with it came waves of pain and fear that weren't his own. He gasped, doubling over as unfamiliar emotions flooded through him. Panic, agony, desperation. They washed over him in relentless waves. "Breathe," Alexei commanded, his hand moving to the small of Hayden's back. "This is part of what it means to be an Omega. You feel their pain." "Make it stop," Hayden whispered, fighting the urge to vomit. "You can help him." Thorne appeared beside them, his earlier coolness replaced by urgent need. "Come." Before Hayden could protest, he was guiding him toward the injured man they'd laid on a table. His chest rose and fell in shallow, labored breaths, blood soaking through his torn shirt from what looked like claw marks. Up close, his pain hit Hayden even harder, making his vision swim. "Put your hands on him," Thorne instructed. "Just focus on calm, on peace." "I don't know how to do this," Hayden protested, memories of battlefield medicine offering no guidance for supernatural healing. "Your instincts do," Alexei said from behind him, his presence solid and unwavering. Hesitantly, Hayden placed his trembling hands on the man's shoulders. His skin burned beneath his touch, and his agony threatened to pull him under. But then something shifted. A connection opened between them, and Hayden found himself sending calm through that connection. Like cool water over flames, the man's breathing slowed, his features relaxing. The pain didn't disappear, but it receded enough that Thorn could begin treating the wounds. "Thank you, Omega," the wounded man whispered, his eyes fluttering open to meet Hayden's with reverence he didn't deserve. Hayden pulled his hands away, stunned by what had happened. "I didn't do anything." "You eased his suffering," Alexei said quietly. "That's the gift of an Omega." A gift he never asked for, Hayden wanted to say. But the words died in his throat as he saw the gratitude in the injured man's eyes. "Alpha," a voice called from the doorway. A woman stood there, her clothes torn, blood streaking her face. "They're regrouping at the northern border, at least 30 of them." Alexei's expression hardened again. They brought their full strength. They must have been watching, waiting for him to turn. "How could they know?" Hayden asked. "A traitor," Thorn said grimly, not looking up from his work. "Someone's been feeding them information." Alexei's hand returned to Hayden's arm, guiding him away from the makeshift medical area. "You need to be somewhere secure. If Irontooth breaches our defenses—" "I want to help," Hayden interrupted, surprised by his own words. Alexei studied him, conflict evident in his expression. "The best way you can help is by staying safe." "That's not what my mother would have done, is it?" Hayden challenged. The words were a shot in the dark, but from the way Alexei's jaw tightened, he knew he'd hit his mark. "Elizabeth was born to this life," he countered. "I've already helped save that man's life," Hayden pointed out, newfound confidence rising within him. "I spent 15 years in combat zones. I'm not helpless." The pendant in his pocket seemed to grow warmer, almost pulsing against his thigh. "Tell me about my mother, please." Alexei's gaze flicked to the chaos around them, then back to Hayden. "Now isn't the time." "It might be the only time if Magnus and his wolves are as dangerous as everyone seems to think." Hayden held his gaze, refusing to be intimidated despite the power radiating from him. Something like respect flickered across Alexei's face. "Your mother was supposed to be my father's mate," he said finally. "She was powerful, fierce, beloved by the pack, but the night before their bonding ceremony, she disappeared." His voice hardened. "Many believed she betrayed us, ran to Irontooth. Others thought hunters had taken her." "She never mentioned any of this," Hayden said, struggling to reconcile this image with the quiet, cautious woman who'd raised him. "She was always afraid, always looking over her shoulder." "With good reason," Alexei replied. "If either Irontooth or our pack had found her with a half-grown son who might inherit her powers—" Another crash interrupted them, this one closer, followed by the sound of breaking glass and snarling. Alexei pushed Hayden behind him instantly, his body tensing as he faced the threat. 3 enormous wolves burst through a side entrance, their fur matted with blood, teeth bared. Behind them came fighters, half-shifted creatures with the worst aspects of both human and wolf, their movements jerky and wrong, eyes glowing with malevolence. "Irontooth," Alexei growled, and before Hayden's eyes, his form rippled and changed. Where the Alpha King had stood moments before, a massive black wolf now crouched, his shoulders reaching Hayden's chest, silver eyes the only feature recognizable from his human form. He lunged forward, meeting the first attacker with a force that shook the floor beneath Hayden's feet. Around them, others were shifting too, Silverblood pack members transforming to defend their home. The sounds of combat filled the air, snarls, screams, the wet sound of teeth sinking into flesh. Hayden backed against the wall, terror freezing him in place as he watched Alexei fight. Despite being outnumbered, he moved with lethal precision, taking down one attacker after another. But even as he watched, more Irontooth wolves poured in through the broken entrance. Something clawed at Hayden's senses. A bitter smell, acrid and chemical. The Irontooth wolves were different, he realized. Wrong somehow. Their movements were too erratic, their eyes too wild. "They're drugged." Thorn appeared beside Hayden, pressing a silver knife into his hand. "Some concoction Magnus forces on them to make them stronger, more aggressive, but it burns them out eventually, kills them." "That's horrible," Hayden whispered, clutching the knife. "That's Irontooth." Thorn's expression was grim. If they take you, that's what they'll use your gifts for, to keep the drugged ones functional longer, to extend their suffering. The thought made bile rise in Hayden's throat. He clutched the pendant in his pocket with his free hand, drawing strength from its familiar contours. Across the room, Alexei dispatched another attacker, but not before sharp claws raked across his flank, drawing blood. Hayden felt his pain like a blow to his own body, making him gasp. "Focus," Thorn commanded. "Use your connection to him. Support him." "I don't know how," Hayden said desperately. "The same way you helped the injured fighter. Reach for him with your mind." It sounded impossible, but Hayden closed his eyes, trying to find that same thread of connection he'd felt earlier. For several heartbeats, there was nothing. Then suddenly he felt him, a presence so powerful it nearly overwhelmed him. Alexei's consciousness burned like a bonfire, fierce and protective, fueled by rage and something else, something tied to Hayden. He sensed strength through that connection, trying to soothe Alexei's pain without dampening his fighting spirit. His silver eyes found Hayden's across the chaotic room, widening slightly in surprise. Hayden felt his acknowledgement, his gratitude, and beneath it, a possessiveness that should have frightened him, but somehow didn't. A snarl from Hayden's right broke his concentration. An iron-toothed wolf had spotted him, its muzzle curling back to reveal blood-stained fangs as it charged. Hayden raised the silver knife, knowing it would do little against such a creature. But before the wolf reached him, another form intercepted it. A sleek gray wolf that moved like quicksilver, taking the attacker down with precise ferocity. When the gray wolf turned, its eyes met Hayden's with familiar intensity. "Thorn," he realized, recognizing something in that gaze that transcended wolf form. The healer positioned himself protectively before Hayden as two more attackers approached. Hayden raised the knife again, determined not to be helpless, even as fear threatened to paralyze him. Then the pendant in his pocket grew searingly hot. He pulled it out reflexively, gasping as it glowed silver blue in his palm. The approaching wolves faltered, backing away from the light with whimpers of fear. "The Moonstone," he heard someone whisper. "He bears the Moonstone." The fighting around them slowed, attention turning to the glowing pendant in Hayden's hand. Alexei broke away from his opponent, returning to Hayden's side in a few powerful bounds. Even in wolf form, his presence next to him felt right, somehow aligned. A massive gray wolf with a scarred face pushed to the front of the remaining iron-tooth attackers. His eyes fixed on the pendant, then on Hayden, hatred and covetousness mingling in his gaze. "Magnus!" Thorn hissed, having shifted back to human form, unmindful of his nakedness. The scarred wolf snarled, then in a fluid motion shifted to his human form. A man with the same scarred face, his body corded with lean muscle, eyes cold and calculating. "The prodigal son returns," he said, his voice surprisingly soft for such a dangerous predator. "With Elizabeth's Moonstone, no less." "How convenient," Alexei growled beside Hayden, having shifted back to human form, his massive body tense to attack. "Easy, Alexei," Magnus smiled, revealing teeth that remained oddly sharp even in human form. "I'm simply here to welcome the Omega home." His gaze slid back to Hayden. After all, he belongs with his mother's chosen pack. The pendant pulsed in Hayden's hand as a terrible suspicion dawned. "Where is my mother?" he demanded, stepping forward despite Alexei's warning growl. Magnus's smile widened. "Come to Iron-Tooth territory, and I'll reunite you." He gestured to his remaining fighters, who began backing toward the exit. 3 days, little Omega, then I'll come for you again, unless you come to me first." With that, he shifted back to wolf form and retreated with his pack, leaving destruction and wounded fighters in their wake. Alexei turned to face Hayden, his expression thunderous. "You will not go to him." "If he has my mother—" "He's lying," Alexei cut him off. "Elizabeth would never join Iron-Tooth. Never." But Hayden could see the doubt in his eyes, the old wound. He couldn't be certain, and neither could Hayden. The pendant continued to glow in his palm, casting eerie blue light across Alexei's features. He reached out slowly, his fingers hovering above it without touching. "The moonstone was lost when she left," he said quietly. "It's been missing for 20 years. His eyes, intense and questioning, met Hayden's. "How did you get it?" Hayden closed his fingers around the pendant, feeling its warmth. "It's been in my possession for as long as I can remember. I never knew what it was." He met Alexei's gaze steadily. "What exactly is it?" Alexei's expression was unreadable as he studied him. "The Alpha's mate symbol of authority, the heart of the pack." His eyes darkened, and his voice dropped to a whisper that sent a shiver down Hayden's spine. "And further proof that you were always meant to be mine." Night fell over Silverblood territory, bringing with it a tense quiet that felt more dangerous than the chaos of the attack. The wounded had been treated, the dead honored, the destruction catalogued with grim efficiency. Through it all, Hayden remained at the center of attention, pack members approaching to introduce themselves with reverence in their eyes, their emotions washing over him in waves he was still learning to navigate. Alexei had reluctantly left his side to coordinate patrols and defenses, though Hayden felt his awareness of him like a tether between them, stretching but never breaking. In his absence, a tall, elderly man with white hair and piercing blue eyes had introduced himself as Victor, the pack's oldest advisor. "I knew your mother well," he said, his voice carrying the weight of decades. "She was extraordinary, as it seems are you." "I need answers," Hayden said, the pendant now hanging around his neck, its glow having faded to a subtle shimmer that only appeared when touched directly. "About my mother, about this moonstone, about why Magnus wants me." Victor nodded, leading Hayden to a secluded alcove where they could speak privately. "There is much to tell, and little time before Magnus returns, but perhaps most pressing is what you now carry." His gaze fell to the crescent pendant. "The moonstone is an artifact from the earliest days of our kind. It belongs to the Alpha's mate, yes, but it's more than a symbol. It's a conduit of power, a binding force that connects the pack across distances, strengthens them in battle." "And my mother had it," Hayden said, pieces beginning to fall into place. "Which means she was to be mated to Alexei's father, Dmitri, the former Alpha King," Victor confirmed. "The ceremony was to take place under the blood moon 20 years ago. Instead, she vanished with the stone, weakening the pack considerably." "Why would she do that?" Hayden asked, unable to reconcile this with the loving mother he knew. Victor's expression turned troubled. "That is the question that has haunted us for 2 decades. Some believed she betrayed us for Magnus, who had made overtures to her. Others thought she was taken by hunters or killed by the Lunar Eclipse Council." "The what?" "A shadow organization," Victor said, lowering his voice further. "Ancient wolves who pull the strings from darkness, manipulating the packs for their own purposes. Few believe they exist anymore, but there was a time when their name alone inspired terror." The pendant warmed against Hayden's chest, as if responding to the name. Something in his blood seemed to recognize it, fear and rage mingling in a response he couldn't understand. "What does this all have to do with me?" he asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Victor studied him intently. "You are Elizabeth's son, which makes you royalty among our kind. But you are also an Omega, the rarest and most valuable of wolves. And now you bear the moonstone, which has not only accepted you, but seems to respond to you in ways I've never seen in all my years." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "There are ancient prophecies, Hayden. Whispers of a wolf who would unite Alpha strength with Omega heart, who would bear the moonstone and break the bonds that have enslaved our kind for generations." Hayden felt the weight of destiny pressing down on him, a burden he never asked for and wasn't sure he wanted. "And Alexei thinks I'm this wolf? That I'm meant to be his mate?" Victor's eyes gleamed with something like hope. "Alexei has waited a long time for you, longer than you know. The connection between you is already forming, is it not? You can feel him even now, at the edge of your consciousness." It was true. Even as they spoke, Hayden was aware of Alexei's presence somewhere in the castle, like a constant hum beneath his skin. "But it must be your choice," Victor continued, surprising Hayden. "Prophecy or not, a forced mating would only bring destruction. The Moonstone requires willing hearts to reach its full potential." Before Hayden could respond, the pendant at his chest flared with sudden heat and light. At the same moment, a howl cut through the night, powerful and commanding. Victor's face paled. "That's Alexei's war call. The northern border has been breached." "Magnus?" Hayden asked, already knowing the answer. "Too soon," Victor said, moving with surprising speed for his age. "He wasn't supposed to return for 3 days." Hayden followed him through the castle's winding corridors toward the sound of gathering warriors. As they reached the main hall, he saw Alexei standing on a raised platform, issuing commands to assembled fighters. His eyes found Hayden's immediately, and for a brief moment, relief flashed across his features. "Magnus comes with twice the force from this morning," he announced to the room. "And he's not alone. There are others with him, wolves I don't recognize. They bear the violet eyes of legend." A murmur of fear rippled through the gathered pack. Victor's hand tightened on Hayden's arm. "The Lunar Eclipse Council," he whispered, his voice trembling. "They've emerged from shadow. The prophecy has begun." Alexei's gaze remained locked with Hayden's, a silent question in his silver eyes. Whatever came next, Hayden realized, would change everything. The pendant burned against his skin, his mother's face flashed in his memory, and the tether connecting him to Alexei pulled taut with expectation. He'd awoken as an Omega in a werewolf pack, unaware the Alpha King had already chosen him. Now he stood at the precipice of a war centuries in the making, holding a power he didn't understand in his hands. The choice, as Victor had said, was his. And as the first howls of approaching enemies echoed across Silverblood territory, Hayden Pierce realized that perhaps this was what he'd been searching for his entire life. Not just his mother, but his purpose, his place in a world far larger and more dangerous than he'd ever imagined. The moon hung heavy in the night sky as Silverblood warriors gathered in the courtyard, their breath forming clouds in the cold mountain air. Hayden stood at the edge of the crowd, the moonstone pendant warm against his chest, watching as Alexei transformed the chaos into order with efficient commands. "They come from the north and east," Alexei announced, his voice carrying across the assembled pack. "2 separate forces converging. Magnus leads one. The violet-eyed ones lead the other." Hayden felt the collective shudder that passed through the pack at the mention of the violet eyes. Fear rippled through the crowd, washing over him in waves that threatened to drown him in their intensity. "What are these violet-eyed ones?" he whispered to Victor, who remained at his side, a steadying presence in the storm of emotions. "The Lunar Eclipse Council," Victor replied, his weathered face grim. "Ancient wolves who feed on the power of others. They've stayed in shadow for centuries, manipulating the packs from afar. If they've emerged now—" He left the sentence unfinished, but his meaning was clear. Whatever was happening transcended the usual pack rivalries. Alexei's gaze found Hayden across the courtyard, silver eyes locking with his. Through their strange connection, Hayden felt the Alpha's concern, his determination, and beneath it all, a fierce protectiveness that made something inside him respond with answering heat. "Divide into your units," Alexei commanded. "Elders, children, and those unable to fight will retreat to the mountain sanctuaries. 1st and 2nd defense units to the borders. 3rd unit remains to protect the heart." As the pack dispersed to their assignments, Alexei approached Hayden with long, purposeful strides. The crowd parted before him instinctively, no one daring to stand in the Alpha's path. "You should go with the elders," he said without preamble, his voice roughened by authority. "The sanctuaries are impregnable." Hayden straightened his spine, meeting that silver gaze directly. "I'm not hiding while others fight." "You don't know how to shift yet," Alexei countered. "You've barely begun to understand your gifts." "I spent 15 years in special forces," Hayden replied evenly. "I may not have claws and fangs, but I know how to fight." Something flickered in Alexei's eyes. Respect, perhaps, or frustration at his stubbornness. Before he could respond, Victor stepped forward. "The Moonstone responds to him, Alexei," the elder said. "It may prove our greatest weapon." Alexei's jaw tightened. conflict evident in his expression. After a moment, he gave a curt nod. "You stay with me. No heroics, no wandering off. If I say run, you run. Understood?" "Understood," Hayden agreed, ignoring the thrill that passed through him at the thought of fighting alongside the Alpha. Victor cleared his throat. "Before you face Magnus, there is something Hayden needs to see. Something that might explain his mother's disappearance." Alexei's brow furrowed. "We don't have time for—" "Make time," Victor interrupted, a rare challenge in his voice. "If the Council has returned, he needs to know everything." For a moment, Alpha and Elder locked in silent battle of wills. Then Alexei relented with a sharp nod. "The Hall of Records. 10 minutes, no more. Then we join the defense." Victor led them through the castle's winding corridors, down stone steps worn smooth by centuries of passage, until they reached a heavy oak door bound with iron. Alexei placed his palm against it, murmuring words in a language Hayden didn't recognize. The door swung open silently, revealing a circular chamber lined with shelves of ancient books and scrolls. In the center of the room stood a stone pedestal, upon which rested a massive, leather-bound tome. Victor moved to it with reverence, his fingers tracing the faded symbols embossed on its cover. "Our history," he explained. Every Alpha, every significant event in the Silverblood lineage, recorded here since we first took these mountains as our territory 1,000 years ago." He opened the book, carefully turning yellowed pages until he found what he sought. "Here, the night your mother disappeared." Hayden leaned forward, his heart hammering in his chest. On the page was an illuminated drawing of a full moon tinged with red. Beneath it, elegant script detailed the events of that night. "The blood moon ceremony was prepared," Victor read aloud. "Elizabeth Pierce, chosen mate of Alpha Dmitry Volkov, bearer of the moonstone, was to complete the mating ritual under the red moon's light. But as midnight approached, she fled, taking with her the sacred stone and weakening the pack bonds. Pursuers found signs of struggle at the eastern border, blood, but no body. Suspicion fell upon Magnus Irontooth, who had made his desire for Elizabeth known." Hayden's fingers touched the page, tracing his mother's name. "This doesn't sound like her. She wouldn't abandon her responsibilities without reason." "Turn the page," Alexei said quietly. Victor did, revealing a section that had been written in a different hand, the ink fresher, the strokes more urgent. Later evidence suggested Elizabeth's flight may have been forced. A witness, now deceased, claimed to have seen figures with violet eyes at the eastern border that night. 3 silver markers were found, symbols of the eclipse. The pendant at Hayden's chest pulsed warmly, as if responding to the words. "The Council took her," he said, certainty flooding through him. "Not Magnus." "We believe so," Alexei confirmed, his face hardened with old grief. "My father spent years searching, following every rumor, every whisper. It drove him to madness in the end." "But why?" Hayden asked. "Why take her?" Victor and Alexei exchanged glances. "We never knew for certain," Victor said carefully. "But there were rumors, prophecies." "About me," Hayden guessed, pieces falling into place. "They took her because of me." Alexei's hand settled on his shoulder, surprisingly gentle for such a powerful being. "Your mother was to be mated to my father. Such a union would have strengthened both bloodlines. If you were born of that union, bearing both royal Alpha blood and rare Omega traits, I would fulfill the prophecy," Hayden finished, understanding dawning. "Whatever that means." "It means hope," Victor said softly. "For an end to the Council's manipulation, for true freedom for all packs." "And they feared that," Alexei added, his voice hardening. "Feared it enough to tear your mother away from her home, her future mate, to keep you hidden from your heritage." A howl echoed through the castle, urgent and alarming. Alexei's head snapped up, his body tensing. "They've breached the first defense line." "We need to go," Hayden said, new determination filling him. If the Council had taken his mother, held her for 20 years, perhaps they still had her. Perhaps Magnus knew where she was. Alexei nodded, already moving toward the door. "Stay close to me. No matter what happens, no matter what you see, stay close." They raced through the castle and out into the night. The scene that greeted them was chaos incarnate. Wolves clashed at the edge of a clearing, snarls and howls filling the air. Blood darkened the snow, steam rising from hot droplets in the cold. "Magnus approaches from the west," a bloodied warrior reported, limping toward them. "The violet ones from the north. They're hurting us, Alpha." Alexei cursed under his breath. "They're corralling us toward the ravine, backing us into a corner." "Why not just attack directly?" Hayden asked, scanning the battlefield with military precision, assessing strengths, weaknesses, patterns. "Because they don't want to destroy us," Victor said grimly. "They want to control us, break us, and they want you, Hayden, alive." Alexei's hand found Hayden's wrist, his grip firm and warm. "I won't let them take you." The possessiveness in his voice should have chafed, but instead Hayden found himself drawing strength from it, from the certainty in those silver eyes. "I'm not easy to take," he promised, patting the silver knife now sheathed at his hip. A commotion at the edge of the clearing drew their attention. The fighting parted like a wave, wolves on both sides backing away as a massive figure approached. Magnus in human form, clad only in dark trousers despite the cold, his scarred chest bare, his eyes gleaming with malice. "Alexei!" he called, his voice carrying across the battlefield. "Still hiding behind your walls while others fight your battles?" Alexei stiffened beside Hayden, a growl rumbling in his chest. "He's baiting you," Hayden murmured. "Classic psychological warfare." "I know," Alexei replied, his voice tight with controlled rage, "but I cannot ignore a direct challenge from another Alpha." Before Hayden could respond, Alexei stepped forward into the clearing. "I hide from nothing, Magnus," he called back, "least of all a dog who drugs his own pack into submission." Magnus bared his teeth, the expression more snarl than smile. "Bold words from a king without a crown. Without the moonstone, your rule has always been tenuous. Your father understood that in the end, before he died whimpering for the mate who abandoned him." Alexei moved with blinding speed, shifting mid-leap into his massive wolf form. Magnus matched his transformation, meeting him in the center of the clearing with a clash of fangs and claws that sent snow flying. The two alphas circled each other, feinting and striking, blood darkening their fur. They were evenly matched in size, but Alexei moved with precision, while Magnus fought with brutal, drugged strength. Hayden felt every blow Alexei took as if it were his own, the connection between them thrumming with shared pain. The pendant at his chest grew hot, responding to his distress. "The moonstone," Victor whispered beside him. "It's trying to help him. Let it." "How?" Hayden asked desperately, watching as Magnus's fangs caught Alexei's shoulder, tearing flesh. "Focus on your connection to him, on your desire to protect, to strengthen. The stone will do the rest." Hayden closed his eyes, concentrating on the tether between himself and Alexei. It vibrated like a plucked string, carrying pain and determination back and forth between them. He poured his own strength into it, imagining it flowing from his core, through the pendant, into Alexei's powerful form. The moonstone flared beneath his shirt, heat spreading outward from his chest. When he opened his eyes, he gasped. A faint blue aura surrounded Alexei, barely perceptible except to those looking for it. The Alpha moved faster, struck harder, his wounds closing almost as quickly as they opened. Magnus noticed the change, confusion flickering in his feral eyes. He redoubled his attacks, becoming more reckless, more vicious. But Alexei matched him blow for blow, driving him back step by step. Then, from the northern edge of the clearing, came new combatants. 3 figures in black, moving with unnatural grace, their eyes glowing violet in the darkness. The fighting around them ceased as wolves from both packs retreated in instinctive fear. "The Council," Victor breathed, his voice trembling. "They've shown themselves openly." The violet-eyed ones stopped at the edge of the clearing, watching the Alphas fight with cold, assessing eyes. One of them, taller than the others, raised a hand. A gesture so slight it was almost imperceptible. Magnus immediately broke off his attack on Alexei, retreating several paces. His body language shifted from aggression to something like deference. "He's working with them," Hayden realized aloud. "Magnus is their puppet." Alexei shifted back to human form, blood streaking his skin from already healing wounds. "So the rumors were true," he called to the figures. "The great Magnus Irontooth is nothing but a council lapdog." Magnus snarled, but made no move to attack. The tallest violet-eyed figure stepped forward. Its face was ageless, its gender indeterminate, its movements fluid in a way that seemed wrong, inhuman. "Alexei Volkov," it said, its voice resonating strangely, as if multiple throats spoke in unison. "Last of the Volkov line. Your grandfather defied us. Your father hunted us. Will you complete the pattern and die for us as well?" "I'll die for nothing and no one," Alexei replied, his voice steady despite his wounds. "Least of all ancient parasites who feed on what they cannot create." The figure's violet eyes shifted, focusing on Hayden. "The Omega awakens," it said, something like hunger in its voice, "and bears the stone, unexpected, but not unwelcome." Hayden felt its attention like a physical touch, cold and invasive. The pendant at his chest burned in response, a shield against the psychic probe he felt trying to worm its way into his mind. "He's mine," Alexei growled, moving to stand between Hayden and the violet-eyed creature. "Recognized and claimed." "But not mated," the figure countered, its lips curving in a parody of a smile. "The bond is incomplete, the prophecy unfulfilled. He could still serve us, as his mother does." Hayden's heart stuttered in his chest. "My mother? She's alive? Where is she?" "Alive," the creature confirmed, "though perhaps she might wish otherwise after all this time." "You're lying," Alexei said flatly. "Elizabeth would have been useless to you after she fled. You would have killed her once you realized she didn't have what you wanted." "And what did we want, young Alpha?" "The child she carried," Victor interjected, stepping forward despite his age. "The prophecy child, born of royal Alpha blood, bearing Omega gifts, the one who could unite the packs and end your reign." The violet eyes widened slightly, the only indication of surprise in its inhuman face. "The Old One remembers the ancient words, but he forgets a crucial truth. We are eternal. We were here before the first wolf howled at the moon. We will remain when the last pack falls." "Nothing is eternal," Hayden said, finding his voice at last. "Everything has a beginning. Everything has an end." The creature's gaze returned to him, more intense than before. "You speak boldly for one so newly awakened, little Omega, but you know nothing of your power, your purpose. Come with us willingly, and we will show you. We will reunite you with the mother you seek." Hayden felt Alexei tense beside him, readying to intervene if he showed even the slightest inclination to accept. But the offer held no temptation. Something in the creature's violet eyes, in the cold hunger of its voice, told him that any promises it made were poison-coated in honey. "I'll find my mother without your help," he said firmly, "and when I do, I'll make you pay for every moment you kept her from me." The creature's expression didn't change, but the air around it seemed to darken, to thicken with malevolence. "You choose pain, then, for yourself, for your pack, for the Alpha who has claimed you." It raised a hand again, and as one, the iron-toothed wolves resumed their attack. But something had changed. Their eyes now glowed with the same violet light as the council members, their movements more coordinated, more lethal. "They're controlling them directly," Victor shouted above the renewed sounds of battle. "Using them as vessels!" Alexei shifted back to wolf form, rejoining the fight with renewed fury. Hayden watched in horror as the possessed iron-toothed wolves fought with suicidal abandon, caring nothing for their own safety as they pressed the attack on the Silverblood defenders. The moonstone burned against his skin, responding to his distress, his anger. Instinctively, Hayden wrapped his fingers around it, drawing on the connection he felt to Alexei, to the pack, even to this land that should have been his home. Power flowed through him, ancient and wild. The pendant glowed blue-white in his grasp, light spilling between his fingers. Without conscious thought, he stepped forward, into the chaos of battle, the light expanding around him like a physical force. Where it touched the violet-eyed council members, they hissed and retreated. Where it reached the possessed iron-toothed wolves, they stumbled, the unnatural glow fading from their eyes as the council's control faltered. The tallest council member snarled, its face contorting into something less human, more reptilian. "The stone responds to him," it spat, the harmonic quality of its voice fracturing into discordant notes. "Impossible without a completed bond." "Perhaps your prophecies are flawed," Hayden called out, surprised by the steadiness of his own voice. "Perhaps your power isn't what you thought it was." Fury twisted the creature's features. It gestured sharply, and the two other violet-eyed figures moved with blurring speed toward Hayden. But Alexei was faster, intercepting them with savage precision, his massive wolf form a barrier between Hayden and danger. The moonstone's light intensified, forming a shield around Hayden that expanded outward, pushing back the darkness, the malice. Where it touched wounded Silverblood fighters, their injuries began to close. Where it reached exhausted defenders, their strength renewed. "This isn't possible," the lead council member hissed. "The stone cannot be wielded by an untrained, unbonded Omega." "And yet here we are," Hayden replied, stepping forward again, the light advancing with him. He didn't understand what he was doing, was operating purely on instinct, but it felt right, felt natural in a way nothing in his life ever had before. Through the chaotic melee, his eyes found Alexei. The Alpha was magnificent in battle, his black fur gleaming in the moonstone's light, his movements a deadly dance as he fended off multiple attackers. Their gazes locked across the battlefield, and through their connection, Hayden felt Alexei's pride, his wonder, his absolute certainty that this was meant to be. The council leader made a sharp, cutting gesture with one hand. Immediately, Magnus and his remaining conscious fighters began to retreat, forming a protective circle around the violet-eyed ones. "This is merely a beginning," the creature called, its voice once again harmonious, controlled. "The prophecy cannot be fulfilled without the final sacrifice, without blood freely given under the eclipse moon." "What sacrifice?" Hayden demanded. "What are you talking about?" But the council members were already fading into the shadows, Magnus and his pack covering their retreat. Within moments, they had vanished into the dark forest, leaving behind only the dead and wounded as evidence of the battle. Hayden's knees buckled as the moonstone's light receded. The power that had flowed through him ebbed, leaving him drained and shaking. Strong arms caught him before he hit the ground. "I've got you," Alexei murmured, his human form once again wrapped around Hayden's trembling body. "I've got you." "They're gone," Hayden managed, his voice weak with exhaustion. "But they'll be back." "Yes," Alexei agreed, lifting him effortlessly. "But we'll be ready. You were magnificent." Hayden rested his head against Alexei's chest, too tired to fight the comfort of his embrace. "They have my mother." "We'll find her," Alexei promised, carrying him back toward the castle. "Whatever it takes, we'll find her." The remaining Silverblood fighters parted before them, many bowing their heads in respect as they passed. Hayden caught glimpses of awe in their eyes, heard whispers following in their wake. The prophecy. "Did you see the light?" The moonstone answered him. "He hasn't even completed the bond yet." In the great hall, Thorne waited with healing supplies ready. He directed Alexei to place Hayden on a padded bench near the fire, then began examining him with professional efficiency. "Exhaustion, mainly," the healer pronounced after a thorough check. The moonstone drew on his life force without the stabilizing influence of a completed bond. He needs rest, food, and time to recover. "The bond," Hayden murmured, fighting to keep his eyes open. "That's what they meant. About a sacrifice." Alexei knelt beside him, his expression grave. "The mating bond between Alpha and Omega must be sealed with blood freely given under the moon's light. It's ancient tradition, symbolizing the willingness to bleed for each other, to sacrifice for each other." "And they think that will fulfill their prophecy?" Hayden asked, struggling to understand. "Not their prophecy," Victor corrected, joining them by the fire. Ours. The Council fears it, seeks to prevent it or control it. The legend speaks of an Alpha and Omega pair who will unite the packs, break the Council's hold over our kind. When royal blood and crescent moon unite, when Alpha strength and Omega heart become one, the ancient chains shall shatter, but only through the greatest sacrifice, freely given under the blood moon's light. Hayden's eyes drifted shut despite his efforts to stay awake. The pendant at his chest had cooled, returning to its dormant state, but he could still feel its presence, like a second heartbeat against his skin. "Rest now," Alexei's voice came to him as if from a distance. "We have much to discuss when you wake." As consciousness faded, Hayden's last thought was of his mother. Alive. After all these years, alive. Held captive by the violet-eyed Council for reasons he still didn't fully understand. But she was out there, waiting. And he would find her, would free her, no matter the cost. The bond tugged at him. Alexei's presence a steady anchor in the darkness of approaching sleep. The Alpha who had claimed him, who fought for him, who looked at him with silver eyes full of wonder and hope and something dangerously close to devotion. Perhaps there were worse fates than being claimed by such a wolf. Perhaps, Hayden thought as sleep finally claimed him, the prophecy was not a burden to be feared, but a destiny to be embraced. With his last conscious thought, he reached along the bond between them, sending not words, but a feeling. A tentative acceptance, a willingness to consider what had seemed impossible only hours before. Alexei's response came immediately, a wave of fierce joy and protective devotion that wrapped around Hayden's fading consciousness like a blanket, following him down into dreams of silver eyes and moonlight. Hayden woke to sunlight streaming through tall windows, casting golden patterns across the stone floor. For a moment, he didn't remember where he was, reaching instinctively for the familiar weight of his service weapon. Then memory flooded back. The battle, the Council, the Moonstone's power flowing through him like liquid fire. He sat up slowly, his body aching in unfamiliar ways. The chamber he found himself in wasn't the one he'd first awakened in days ago, but something grander. Heavy tapestries adorned the walls, depicting wolves running beneath moon-filled skies. The bed beneath him was massive, clearly built for someone larger than himself. The scent hit him then. Pine and winter snow and something uniquely masculine. Alexei. This was the Alpha's personal chamber. "You're awake." The voice came from the doorway, where Thorn stood with a tray of food and medicine. "How do you feel?" Hayden assessed himself with military precision. "Sore, hungry, but stronger than I expected after whatever that was." Thorn nodded, approaching to set the tray on a nearby table. "The Moonstone drew heavily on your life force. Without a completed bond to stabilize the energy flow, it could have been much worse." "How long was I out?" "Nearly 20 hours. The Alpha has barely left your side. I only convinced him to attend the War Council an hour ago." Hayden's hand went to his chest, where the pendant still rested, cool against his skin. "What happened exactly? With the stone?" Thorn's expression grew thoughtful. "In all my years as pack healer, I've never seen anything like it. The Moonstone is supposed to amplify the bond between Alpha and Omega, strengthen the pack through that connection. But you wielded it directly, without a completed bond, against the Council themselves." He shook his head in wonder. "Some of the elders are calling it a miracle." Hayden snorted, swinging his legs over the side of the bed. "It wasn't a miracle. I just followed my instincts." "Precisely," Thorn said. "Your instincts as an Omega, as Elizabeth's son, as the one foretold. The prophecy speaks of—" "I've heard enough about prophecies," Hayden interrupted, rising to his feet. His legs felt shaky, but held his weight. "Right now, I care about finding my mother. The Council said she's alive." Thorn's expression sobered. "Yes. Alexei has called in scouts from all allied packs, searching for any trace of Council activity that might lead to her." "Good." Hayden moved to the window, gazing out at the snow-covered mountains beyond. Silverblood territory stretched for miles, wild and beautiful. Something in his blood responded to the sight, a sense of belonging he'd never felt anywhere else. And Magnus? Retreated with his pack, but our scouts report unusual movement at the Iron Tooth borders. They're preparing for something. The door opened again, and Hayden turned to find Alexei standing in the threshold. The Alpha's silver gaze swept over him, assessing, intense. Relief visibly loosened the set of his powerful shoulders when he saw Hayden standing. "You should be resting," he said, though without real admonishment. "I've rested enough," Hayden replied. "We need to talk." Alexei nodded, dismissing Thorn with a gesture. The healer departed silently, closing the door behind him. For a moment, the two men simply regarded each other across the room, the bond between them humming with unspoken tension. "The council has my mother," Hayden said finally, breaking the silence. "Yes." Alexei moved closer, his movements predatory even in human form. "But finding her won't be simple. The council has hidden places, fortresses built into mountains, beneath lakes, places they've held for centuries. You've been searching for her." It wasn't a question. Hayden had sensed it through their connection, Alexei's decades-long hunt for Elizabeth. The Alpha nodded. "At first for my father's sake, later for my own reasons." "What reasons?" Alexei's gaze was steady. "I was 16 when she disappeared. Too young to understand fully, but old enough to feel the loss to our pack. My father's descent into madness left me Alpha far too early. I swore I would find her, bring her home, restore what was broken." "And now?" Hayden asked quietly. "Now I want to find her for you." The simple honesty in his voice caught Hayden off guard. The boy who lost his mother deserves answers. Deserves to know she never abandoned him by choice. Something tight in Hayden's chest loosened slightly. "Thank you," he said, meaning it. Alexei moved to the window beside him, their shoulders nearly touching. "The battle yesterday. What you did with the Moonstone. Victor says it shouldn't have been possible. Yet it happened." "Yes." Alexei turned to face him fully. "You channeled the stone's power without a completed bond, drove back the council, healed our wounded. Even the oldest texts speak of nothing like it." Hayden shrugged, uncomfortable with the wonder in Alexei's voice. "I just reacted. It felt natural." "Natural," Alexei echoed, a hint of a smile touching his lips. "You truly have no idea how extraordinary you are, do you?" Before Hayden could respond, a knock came at the door. Alexei's expression hardened as he called for the visitor to enter. A young female wolf with a messenger's insignia stepped inside, bowing low before speaking. "Alpha, the scouts have returned from the eastern border. They found something. Someone." Hayden's pulse quickened. "My mother?" The messenger hesitated, glancing between them. "An injured woman was found in the abandoned mines. She bears the mark of the Silverblood pack, but..." "But what?" Alexei demanded. "She's been tortured, Alpha. Recently and extensively. She's asking for the Omega, by name." Hayden was moving before the messenger finished speaking, pushing past her toward the door. Alexei caught his arm, his grip gentle but unyielding. "Wait," he said quietly. "It could be a trap." "Or it could be my mother," Hayden countered, not bothering to hide the desperation in his voice. "After 20 years, she could be right here, now. Would you have me wait?" Conflict warred in Alexei's expression. Finally, he released Hayden's arm with a nod. "We go together, with guards." "Fine," Hayden agreed, knowing it was the best compromise he'd get. "But we go now." They moved swiftly through the castle, Alexei summoning a protective detail with curt orders as they descended toward the healing quarters. Hayden felt the stares of pack members as they passed, heard the whispers following in their wake. Word of what had happened in battle had spread, growing with each telling, no doubt. The healing quarters were located in the oldest part of the castle, stone walls radiating the peculiar chill of places that have stood for centuries. Guards snapped to attention as Alexei approached, bowing their heads in deference. "She's inside," one reported. "Thorn is with her. She's not stable, Alpha." Alexei nodded, then looked to Hayden. "Ready?" Hayden had faced insurgents, warlords, and death countless times during his military career. None of it compared to the terror that gripped him now at the prospect of seeing his mother after all these years. "Ready," he managed. The room beyond was warm and dimly lit, smelling strongly of medicinal herbs and blood. In the center, on a narrow bed, lay a woman so thin she seemed made of angles and shadows, her once blonde hair now streaked with gray, her face lined with years of hardship. But even after 20 years, even with the changes time and suffering had wrought, Hayden would have known her anywhere. "Mom," he whispered, his voice breaking. Her eyes fluttered open at the sound, the same eyes he saw in the mirror each morning, though now dulled with pain and exhaustion. Recognition dawned slowly, followed by horror. "No," she rasped, trying to push herself up. "No, you can't be here. You have to run." Hayden rushed to her side, taking her frail hand in his. "Mom, it's okay. You're safe now. We're both safe." But she was shaking her head frantically, her gaze moving past him to Alexei. "You don't understand. They let me go. They let me escape." "Who did, Elizabeth?" Alexei asked, moving to stand beside Hayden. "The council?" Elizabeth's laugh was a broken sound. "The council was just the beginning. Just their puppets, just like Magnus, just like all of us." Her eyes returned to Hayden, desperate. "I tried so hard to keep you from this place, from this life. I did everything to suppress your nature, to hide you from them." "From who, Mom?" Hayden asked, squeezing her hand. "The lunar eclipse." She spat the words like poison. "The ones who rule from shadows, who use us like game pieces." Her gaze traveled to the moonstone hanging from Hayden's neck, and fresh terror filled her eyes. "You're wearing it. Oh God, you're wearing it." "It's just a pendant," he said, confused by her reaction. "It's always been with me." "Because I hid it there," she whispered. "In plain sight. As long as you never wore it, never activated it, they couldn't track you." Alexei's expression had darkened. "The council is real, Elizabeth. We faced them yesterday, but they're not infallible. Your son drove them back with the moonstone's power." "Is that what you think?" Her gaze was challenging despite her weakness. "Then why did your father die exactly as the prophecy foretold? Why did the 3 blood moons come? Why did the firstborn sons of 7 pack lines perish in a single night?" She clutched Hayden's hand desperately. "And why did they torture me for 20 years, demanding to know where I'd hidden the moonstone, only to suddenly let me go now?" Hayden felt sick. "Someone tortured you for 20 years?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Until I escaped 3 days ago." She tried to pull the pendant from his neck. "Take it off. Destroy it before they—" The window exploded inward in a shower of glass. Alexei moved with supernatural speed, shielding both Elizabeth and Hayden with his body as 3 black-clad figures entered through the shattered opening. They moved with inhuman grace, their faces obscured by strange masks that covered everything but their eyes that glowed an unnatural violet. "The eclipse sends its regards," one of them said, voice distorted to an inhuman pitch. "And thanks you for activating the stone, little Omega. You've made you and your mother so much easier to find." Alexei growled, his body beginning to shift. "You are not welcome in my territory." "Your territory?" The figure laughed, the sound like grinding metal. "Your kind has never owned anything. You merely borrow it until we have need of it." They moved in perfect synchronization, withdrawing weapons that gleamed silver in the dim light. Not ordinary silver, Hayden realized with a jolt of fear, but something else. Something that made the air around them waver like heat above asphalt. Alexei lunged at them, partially shifted, his movements a blur of savage grace. But the masked figures were inhumanly fast, ducking and weaving around his attacks with practiced ease. "Get Elizabeth out of here!" Alexei shouted to Hayden between blows. Hayden tried to help his mother stand, but she was too weak, her body trembling with the effort. "Leave me," she begged. "Run." "I'm not leaving you," he said firmly. "Not when I just found you again." One of the masked figures broke away from the fight with Alexei, advancing toward them with measured steps. "How touching," it said, raising its blade. "The reunion we've waited so long to witness." The moonstone at Hayden's throat grew hot suddenly, pulsing with blue light that filled the room. The advancing figure hesitated, its glowing eyes narrowing. "Impossible," it hissed. "The stone responds to his will." Elizabeth's expression shifted from fear to fierce pride. "My son is more than you bargained for," she said, her voice stronger now. "More than I knew he could be." Hayden didn't understand what was happening, only that the pendant seemed to be reacting to his emotions, his fear, his determination to protect his mother. Acting on instinct, he grasped it fully in his palm, focusing on that determination, on the newfound strength he'd discovered since awakening in this new life. The blue light intensified, coalescing into a shield-like barrier between them and their attacker. The masked figure recoiled, raising an arm to shield its eyes. "Alexei," Hayden called out. "The light! Use the light!" Somehow the Alpha understood. With a powerful leap, he drove the two figures he was fighting toward the blue glow. When they contacted the light, they screamed, an inhuman sound of agony that set Hayden's teeth on edge. Their bodies seemed to blur, to lose definition, as if the light was unraveling whatever magic held them together. "Fall back," the third figure commanded, and with extraordinary speed, all three retreated through the window and disappeared into the night. The room fell silent, save for their heavy breathing. The moonstone's light dimmed slowly until it was just a pendant again, though it remained warm against Hayden's skin. "What was that?" he asked shakily. "What just happened?" Alexei's expression was grave as he shifted fully back to human form. "Something I thought was just a legend. The moonstone's true power awakening." His gaze moved from Hayden to Elizabeth. "But only an alpha pair should be able to wield it that way." Elizabeth struggled to sit up, her eyes never leaving Hayden's face. "Unless the Omega is also an alpha by birth." Her voice was quiet but clear. "Unless he's the last of a royal bloodline thought to be extinct." "Mom," Hayden whispered, not understanding. She smiled sadly. "I never told you about your father." "How could I? He was the last alpha of the Silver Mist Pack, wiped out by the Eclipse for defying them." She reached for his face, her fingers trembling as they traced his cheek. "You're not just an Omega, my darling. You're a royal alpha born with an Omega's gifts, the first in 1,000 years. Alexei inhaled sharply. "The Balancer," he murmured. "The one from the ancient prophecy." "What prophecy?" Hayden asked, feeling increasingly overwhelmed. "When moon and blood combine in one," Elizabeth recited wearily, "when alpha strength and omega heart unite, the Eclipse's reign shall be undone." "That's why they hunted you," Alexei said, understanding dawning. "Not just for the moonstone, but because you carried his child." She nodded, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. "I ran from your father, Alexei, because I knew what our union would bring. War, bloodshed, death. I couldn't bear it." Her eyes filled with tears. "But all I did was delay the inevitable. Now the Eclipse knows he exists, knows he can control the moonstone. They won't stop coming." Alexei moved closer, his hand finding Hayden's again. "Let them come," he said, his voice deadly calm. "They've hidden in shadows too long, manipulated our kind, set us against each other." His gaze met Hayden's, fierce and determined. "Together, we can end their rule." "Together," Hayden echoed, the word feeling right on his tongue, despite the absurdity of the situation. Just days ago, he'd been a former soldier searching for his missing mother. Now, he was an Omega werewolf, apparently also an alpha by birth, wielding a magical moonstone and being hunted by a shadowy organization he hadn't known existed. Yet, as he stood there between his newfound mother and the man who had claimed him as his own, he felt something he'd never expected. Purpose, clarity, belonging. The moonstone warmed against his skin, as if affirming his thoughts. "They'll come again," Elizabeth warned. "Stronger next time, with greater numbers." "And we'll be ready," Alexei said, his thumb tracing circles on Hayden's hand. "The packs will unite under a true alpha pair." "You're assuming I agree to be your mate," Hayden pointed out. though the challenge in his voice was undermined by the way his body instinctively leaned toward Alexei's. Alexei's lips curved into that almost smile again. "I'm assuming nothing. I'm hoping." His voice dropped lower, meant for Hayden's ears alone. "Claiming you as mine was instinct. Earning your choice will be my privilege." The sincerity in his words caught Hayden off guard, warming something deep within him. This fierce, powerful alpha was offering him choice, something he suspected didn't come naturally to his kind. Elizabeth's hand tightened around his. "Dawn comes soon," she said, her eyes beginning to droop with exhaustion. With it, decisions. Alexei nodded, stepping back. "Rest, Elizabeth. You're home now under my protection." He looked at Hayden. "Both of you." As he turned to leave, to give orders for increased security and to spread word of what had happened, Hayden felt the tether between them stretch again. But now he understood it better. Not just Alexei's claim on him, but something more profound, a connection that had been waiting to form perhaps for generations. Hayden settled beside his mother's bed, holding her hand as she drifted into an uneasy sleep. Outside, the moon hung heavy in the sky, casting silver light through the broken window. Somewhere in the distance, wolves howled, Silverblood pack members calling to each other, warning their enemies, protecting their territory. Their territory. Our territory, Hayden thought, the concept becoming less foreign with each passing hour. He touched the moonstone, feeling its dormant power humming beneath his fingertips. In just a few days, everything he'd believed about himself and his life had changed. He'd awakened as an Omega in a werewolf pack, unaware the Alpha King had already chosen him. Now he understood why, not just instinct or possession, but prophecy. Destiny. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, he found himself wondering what tomorrow would bring and how it would feel to stand beside Alexei as his equal, his partner in the battles to come. Not just his chosen Omega, but his chosen king. Dawn painted the mountains in hues of lavender and gold as Hayden stood on the balcony outside Alexei's private quarters. The Alpha had insisted he stay there after the attack, the safest place in the territory, he'd claimed, though Hayden suspected his motivations weren't entirely about security. Elizabeth had been moved to an adjoining room where Thorne watched over her, administering healing herbs and monitoring her recovery. Hayden hadn't slept. How could he, with everything he'd learned? Instead, he'd spent the night poring over ancient texts Victor had provided, histories of the werewolf packs, legends of the Eclipse, and the complete prophecy his mother had quoted only in part. The full verse was more ominous than he'd expected. When moon and blood combine in one, when Alpha strength and Omega heart unite, the Eclipse's reign shall be undone, but only through the greatest sacrifice, the chosen pair must bleed as one to break the bonds of endless night. The greatest sacrifice part troubled him deeply, as did the references to bleeding and bonds, but what unsettled him most was how right it felt, how the words seemed to resonate with something deep within him, as if his body had always known what his mind was just discovering. "You should be resting," Alexei's deep voice came from behind him. Hayden turned to find him watching from the doorway, his powerful frame silhouetted against the warm light of his quarters. Despite having offered Hayden his bed, he'd spent the night elsewhere, a gesture of respect that had surprised him. "So should you," Hayden countered. "You fought harder than anyone yesterday." Alexei moved to join him at the railing, his shoulder nearly touching Hayden's. "Alpha healing. My wounds are already gone." Hayden glanced at him sideways. In the soft morning light, Alexei's severe features seemed less harsh, almost vulnerable. The scar that ran along his jawline caught the sunlight, and Hayden found himself wondering how he'd gotten it and why it hadn't healed with his Alpha abilities. "I read the prophecy," he said, "the full version." Alexei nodded, his eyes on the forest spread below them. "I thought you might." "The greatest sacrifice," Hayden quoted. "That doesn't sound promising." Alexei's lips curved slightly. "Prophecies are rarely straightforward. What seems like sacrifice might be something else entirely." "Like what?" "Like surrender," he said quietly. "Like letting go of what we think we know, what we think we want, to embrace something greater. Hayden studied his profile. This man who had claimed him so possessively just days ago, yet now spoke of surrender. Is that what you're doing? Surrendering? Alexei's silver eyes met his, intense and unguarded. Every moment since I first caught your scent on the wind. He turned fully toward Hayden. I was raised to believe an alpha never bows, never yields, never shows weakness. Yet here I am, hoping for the favor of an omega who challenges every command, who questions every tradition. Is that a complaint? Hayden asked, raising an eyebrow. An admission, Alexei corrected, his voice dropping lower. That you've brought me to my knees without even trying. The confession stole Hayden's breath, this powerful alpha admitting weakness for him. The moonstone warmed against his skin, responding to the surge of emotion his words evoked. Before he could respond, Victor appeared at the doorway, his expression grave. Alpha, Omega, the scouts have returned from the northern border. Alexei straightened, instantly alert. What news? Magnus has assembled the largest force seen in generations. Every iron-toothed wolf capable of fighting, plus mercenaries from smaller packs. Victor's weathered face looked even older in the morning light. And there are others, creatures with violet eyes commanding them, more than we faced yesterday. How long? Alexei asked, his voice hardening. 2 days, perhaps less. They're gathering at the ancient stone circle, the place of power. Hayden felt cold dread settle in his stomach. The eclipse, he said suddenly, remembering something from the texts he'd read overnight. There's a lunar eclipse in 2 days. Victor nodded grimly. The blood moon eclipse. It happens once every 100 years. The texts say the eclipse draw their greatest power from it. And what? Alexei prompted. And it's the only time the prophecy can be fulfilled, the elder finished quietly. The only time the moonstone can reach its full potential. The only time the eclipse can be truly defeated. Alexei and Hayden exchanged glances, the weight of what that meant hanging between them. 2 days to prepare, 2 days to decide, 2 days that would determine not just their fate, but the fate of all werewolf kind. Call the War Council, Alexei commanded. Every alpha within a day's run, every fighter capable of holding a weapon, and bring Thorn. Elizabeth must be well enough to tell us everything she knows about the eclipse. As Victor hurried to carry out his orders, Alexei turned back to Hayden. You understand what this means. It wasn't a question, but Hayden answered anyway. They're forcing our hand. Either we complete the bond before the eclipse, fulfilling our part of the prophecy, or we face them at their strongest, without the full power of the moonstone to aid us, Alexei finished. His hand rose, hovering near Hayden's face, but not quite touching. I would never force this choice on you. The bond must be freely given to have any power at all. Hayden caught his wrist, surprising both of them with the gesture. I know. He met those silver eyes directly. I need time to think, to talk to my mother, but I won't sacrifice innocent lives out of fear or stubbornness. Relief and hope flashed across Alexei's features. That's all I ask, that you consider it. I'm already considering it, Hayden admitted, releasing Alexei's wrist. More than I ever thought I would. The ghost of a smile touched Alexei's lips. Then there's hope for us yet, little Omega. Don't push your luck, Alpha, Hayden retorted, but there was no real heat in his words. As they turned to face the day ahead, to prepare for war and prophecy and choices that would echo through generations, Hayden felt the tether between them pulse with new strength. No longer just a claim, but a possibility. A future neither of them had expected, but that now seemed increasingly inevitable, and, surprisingly, not entirely unwelcome. The War Council gathered in the Great Hall, a somber assembly of pack leaders, warriors, and elders. Maps covered the massive oak table, territories marked in precise detail, troop movements indicated by small carved figurines. Hayden stood beside Alexei, aware of the curious glances cast his way, the whispers that followed wherever he went. Word had spread quickly of his dual nature, both Omega and Alpha Royal, and of the power he'd wielded through the Moonstone. Elizabeth sat nearby, propped up on pillows brought from her sickbed. Though still weak, she had insisted on attending. "I've spent 20 years with these creatures," she'd told Thorne when he'd protested. "No one knows them better." Alexei called the council to order with a single raised hand. Silence fell immediately, the assembled wolves deferring to their alpha without question. 2 days, he began without preamble. 2 days until the blood moon eclipse. 2 days to prepare for the greatest threat our kind has faced in generations. A grizzled alpha from a neighboring pack leaned forward. "How can we be certain this isn't just another border skirmish? Magnus has threatened Silverblood territory before." "This is different," Alexei replied. "The Eclipse themselves have emerged from shadow. They control Magnus completely now, and through him, the entire Iron Tooth pack." "The Eclipse!" another pack leader scoffed. "Children's tales to frighten pups." "They are very real," Elizabeth's voice, though weak, carried across the hall. All eyes turned to her. "I spent 20 years as their prisoner. 20 years watching them experiment on captured wolves, manipulate pack politics, harvest the very essence of our kind for their own power." Hayden moved closer to his mother, resting a supportive hand on her shoulder. Through their contact, he could feel her exhaustion, her fear, but also her iron determination. "Who are they?" he asked, the question that had been burning in him since he'd first heard the name. "What are they?" Elizabeth's gaze swept the room. "They call themselves the First Wolves, though that's a lie. They're something older, something that existed before our kind emerged. Parasites that discovered they could feed on werewolf essence, draw strength from our bonds, our magic." "Essence?" a younger alpha questioned. "Magic? These are not terms our kind use." "Because they've spent centuries ensuring we forget," Elizabeth replied. "Erasing our history, our knowledge, keeping us fractured and fighting among ourselves while they feed on the conflict." She gestured to the moonstone at Hayden's throat. "That pendant is one of the last relics of our true heritage, a focusing tool, created when our kind still remembered how to shape the energy that flows through our blood, our bonds." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Alexei raised his hand again, restoring silence. "Continue, Elizabeth. Tell them what you told me about the Eclipse's plans." She nodded, drawing a shaky breath. "Every 100 years, the blood moon eclipse occurs. During this time, their powers are at their height. They can harvest enough essence to sustain themselves for another century. But they need vessels, werewolves to drain, to use as conduits. And this time, they want the Omega," Victor added, understanding dawning. "An unprecedented source of power." "Not just any Omega," Elizabeth corrected. "My son. Hayden carries both the royal Silvermist bloodline of his father and my Silverblood heritage. The first wolf in a millennium to bear both Alpha and Omega traits, with him as their vessel during the eclipse." "They would become unstoppable," Alexei finished grimly. "Strong enough to step from shadow permanently, to rule our kind openly as they once did in ancient times." A heavy silence fell over the room as the assembled wolves absorbed the magnitude of the threat. "There's more," Elizabeth continued after a moment. "The prophecy speaks of the chosen pair, an Alpha and Omega united in blood and purpose, who can use the Moonstone to break their power forever. That's why they've hunted me all these years, why they let me escape now. They knew it would draw Hayden out, give them the chance to capture him before the bond could be completed." All eyes turned to Hayden and Alexei. The connection between them was visible now, a subtle resonance that seemed to ripple the air when they stood close. "The bond," a female alpha said, her tone careful. "It hasn't been completed yet." "No," Alexei confirmed, his voice neutral, though Hayden could feel the tension radiating from him. "That choice remains before us." "A choice that must be made freely," Victor added pointedly. "Forced bonds hold no power against the eclipse." The discussion continued, strategies proposed and discarded, alliances confirmed, defenses planned. Throughout it all, Hayden remained quiet, absorbing every detail, every nuance. His military training served him well, allowing him to see patterns in the reports, weaknesses in proposed tactics. Occasionally he offered suggestions, surprised when the assembled alphas listened with respect rather than dismissal. As the council drew to a close, the plan was set. Allied packs would converge on Silverblood territory by nightfall. Defenses would be established in 3 rings, with the castle itself as the final stronghold. Scouts would maintain constant surveillance of Irontooth movements, and preparations would be made for the ritual site, should Hayden and Alexei choose to complete their bond before the eclipse. The gathered leaders dispersed to carry out their assigned tasks, leaving Hayden, Alexei, Elizabeth, and Victor alone in the Great Hall. "You did well," Alexei said quietly, his hand brushing Hayden's briefly. "They respect you already." "They fear what's coming," Hayden replied. "Respect is a luxury compared to survival." Elizabeth beckoned him closer. When he knelt beside her chair, she took his face in her trembling hands. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "So sorry for all I kept from you. I thought I was protecting you." "You were," Hayden assured her, covering her hands with his own. "You gave me a normal life, a childhood free from fear." "And now that childhood ends," she said sadly. "Now you must decide." The weight of that decision hung in the air between them all. Alexei moved to the window, giving them space, though the tether between him and Hayden stretched taut with unspoken tension. "The bond," Hayden said quietly. "Tell me what it truly means, beyond the legends and prophecies." Elizabeth's eyes softened. "It's different for every pair. For most, it's a sharing of strength, of thought, of emotion. For alphas and omegas, it runs deeper, a true melding of spirits. You become part of each other while still remaining yourselves. And after, if we survive the eclipse, you would be bound for life," she answered honestly. "Mated pairs cannot be separated without terrible pain, without part of themselves being torn away." Hayden glanced at Alexei's back, the proud set of his shoulders, the power that radiated from him even at rest. A hefty commitment for someone I've known less than a week. "Time means little when souls recognize each other," Victor said quietly. "Your spirits have been seeking each other since before your births. That's what it means to be true mates." "Perhaps," Elizabeth interjected, "you and Alexei should speak alone, without an audience, without pressure." Hayden nodded, rising to his feet. "I'd like that." Alexei turned from the window. "The Western Tower," he suggested. "No one will disturb us there." They left the Great Hall together, walking in companionable silence through corridors bustling with preparations for war. Pack members bowed as they passed, eyes lowered in respect. Hayden was still getting used to that, the deference, the reverence. For a man who had spent his adult life following orders, being suddenly elevated to near royalty was disorienting. The Western Tower was the oldest part of the castle, its stone stairs worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. At its summit was a small circular room with windows facing in all directions, offering a panoramic view of Silverblood territory. Mountains rose majestically in the distance, forests stretched toward the horizon, and far below, wolves moved like shadows across the landscape, patrolling, preparing. "I used to come here as a child," Alexei said, moving to one of the windows, "when the responsibilities of being the Alpha's son became too heavy. I would imagine flying away, becoming something other than what I was born to be." The admission surprised Hayden. This vulnerability, this glimpse of the boy behind the Alpha's mask. "Did you? Fly away?" A small smile touched Alexei's lips. "No. Duty always called me back. My father's increasing instability, the pack's need for leadership. By 16, I was effectively Alpha in all but name." "That's young to bear such a burden." "Perhaps," Alexei agreed, turning to face him. "But it shaped me into who I am, as your experiences shaped you." Hayden leaned against the opposite window, studying the man before him. In the clear light of day, Alexei seemed both more and less intimidating. The power was still there, the authority, but also a deep weariness, a loneliness, that called to something in Hayden's own soul. "Tell me about the bond," he said directly. "Not the prophecy, not the power. What it means to you. Why you want it." Alexei was silent for a long moment, considering his words carefully. "When my father lost Elizabeth, it broke something essential in him. I watched him descend into madness, into obsession. I swore I would never allow myself such weakness, would never give another such power over me." He moved closer, his silver eyes holding Hayden's gaze. "Then I caught your scent on the wind 3 days ago. Something inside me recognized you instantly, not just as an Omega, not just as Elizabeth's son, but as mine, the other half of my soul." The raw honesty in his voice sent a shiver down Hayden's spine. "That's a pretty line, but—" "No lines," Alexei interrupted. "No pretense. You feel it too, the connection between us. It forms whether we will it or not." He was right. Hayden could feel it even now, the invisible tether binding them together, growing stronger with each passing hour. And if we complete the bond, what then? Then we face the eclipse together, with all the power the moonstone can channel through our united blood. Alexei's voice dropped lower. And after, if we survive, we lead the Pax into a new era. Together, equals in all things. Equals? Hayden raised an eyebrow. "You're not exactly known for sharing power, Alpha." A smile, genuine and warm, transformed Alexei's severe features. "I would share it with you. Not because prophecy demands it, but because you've proven yourself worthy of it. Your strength, your courage, your tactical mind. The Pack needs these things. I need these things." The admission, so simply stated, struck Hayden deeply. He'd spent his military career being valued for his skills, his abilities, but never for himself. Never as an equal, as a partner. "And if I refuse?" he asked, needing to be certain. "If I choose not to complete the bond?" Alexei's expression sobered. "Then we face the eclipse with what power we have, and pray it's enough. I won't force you, Hayden. I won't even try to persuade you beyond this conversation. The choice must be truly yours." Hayden moved to the center of the room, feeling the weight of the moonstone against his chest. "I need time. Not much. We don't have much. But enough to be certain." "Of course," Alexei agreed immediately. "The ritual site will be prepared, should you decide. But know this." He stepped closer, close enough that Hayden could feel the heat radiating from his powerful body. "Whatever you choose, I will stand with you against the eclipse. Bond or no bond, you are part of my pack now. I protect what's mine." The possessiveness in his voice should have grated, but instead it sent a rush of warmth through Hayden's core. "I've never belonged to anyone or anything," he said quietly. "Not truly, not by choice." "Then choose," Alexei replied simply. "Not just for prophecy or power or survival. Choose for yourself." Before Hayden could respond, a howl broke the stillness. Not an alarm, but a summons. Alexei's head turned sharply toward the sound. "The ritual masters have arrived from the mountain sanctuaries," he explained. "Elders who guard the old ways, the old knowledge. They will help prepare, should the ritual be needed." Hayden nodded. "Then we should go. There's much to do before nightfall." As they descended the tower stairs, the tether between them seemed to pulse with new awareness, new possibility. Hayden found himself studying Alexei's profile, the proud set of his jaw, the intelligence in his silver eyes. 3 days ago, he would have balked at the idea of binding himself to another so completely. Now, he found himself considering it not just as necessity, but as choice, perhaps even as destiny. The castle hummed with activity, preparations for both war and ritual proceeding simultaneously. In the main courtyard, a delegation of elders had arrived, ancient wolves with white hair and eyes that had seen centuries pass. They conferred with Victor in hushed tones, occasionally glancing toward Hayden with expressions of wonder or speculation. Thorn intercepted them as they crossed the courtyard. "Alpha, the Omega training must begin immediately if he is to be prepared for either battle or ritual." Alexei nodded. "Take him to the heart room. I will join when I can." Hayden followed Thorn through the castle to a circular chamber he hadn't seen before. Its walls were lined with herbs and crystals, a skylight in the domed ceiling, allowing sunlight to fall in a perfect circle on the wooden floor. "The heart room," Thorn explained, "where Omegas traditionally trained and worked. None have used it in 50 years, since the last Omega of our pack died." Hayden stepped into the circle of sunlight, feeling its warmth seep into his skin. "What exactly am I supposed to do here?" "First, understand the extent of your gifts," Thorn replied, moving around him, adjusting curtains to let in more light. "An Omega's primary ability is emotional influence, soothing pain, calming rage, strengthening courage. But combined with alpha blood," he shook his head in wonder, "the possibilities are untested." "The moonstone responded to me," Hayden said, touching the pendant. "Created some kind of shield." Thorn nodded. "Ancient and powerful magic, but I suspect there's more." He guided Hayden through exercises. First simple meditation, then more complex tasks focused on extending his awareness beyond his physical body. Hours passed as Hayden struggled to grasp what Thorn was teaching, frustration mounting as he failed more often than succeeded. "You're fighting your instincts," Thorn observed, his patience apparently inexhaustible. "Stop thinking like a human. Feel like a wolf." "I don't know how," Hayden admitted, running a hand through his hair. "Yes, you do." Thorn's voice softened. "When you helped that injured fighter, when you connected with Alexei during battle, you weren't thinking then. You were feeling." Hayden closed his eyes, trying to recapture that state, the openness, the certainty, the connection that had flowed through him in those moments. The pendant warmed against his skin, encouraging. "Good," Thorn murmured. "Now reach outward. Find the pack bonds. They're like threads connecting every member to the Alpha, and through him to each other." Hayden focused, extending his awareness beyond the room. At first there was nothing but his own consciousness, his own heartbeat. Then, slowly, he began to sense them, filaments of emotion and connection radiating outward like a vast, complex web. At the center was Alexei, his presence a burning star of power and purpose. "I can feel them," Hayden whispered, amazed. "All of them." "Now follow one thread," Thorn instructed. "Anyone in particular." Without hesitation, his awareness followed the strongest connection, the tether binding him to Alexei. He found him immediately, felt his determination, his focus, his underlying concern for the pack, for Hayden. He was in the forest, organizing defenses, issuing commands. Then Hayden sensed something else. Someone watching Alexei from the shadows, their presence clouded with deception and malice. "Someone's there," he gasped, his eyes flying open. "Someone's watching Alexei. Someone who means him harm." Thorn's expression sharpened. "Can you tell who?" "No, I just feel intent, hatred, anticipation." "A spy for the Eclipse, perhaps," Thorn mused. "Or worse. I need to warn him." "Use the bond," Thorn suggested. "Call to him with your mind, as you did in battle." Hayden closed his eyes again, focusing on the tether between them. "Alexei," he projected, putting all his urgency into the thought. "Danger. You're being watched." The response came immediately, a pulse of acknowledgement and reassurance. "I know. Stay where you are. I'll handle this." Relief flooded through Hayden, followed by a surge of pride that surprised him. Of course Alexei was aware. The Alpha missed nothing, sensed everything within his territory. When he opened his eyes, Thorn was watching him with an unreadable expression. "The bond grows stronger by the hour," the healer observed. "Even without the ritual, you connect in ways I've never seen." "Is that unusual?" "Unprecedented," Thorn corrected. "True mates are rare enough. A true Alpha and Omega pair, both of royal bloodlines, both willing to accept the bond." He shook his head. "The legends pale in comparison to what stands before me." A knock at the door interrupted them. A young wolf entered, bowing deeply. "Omega, your presence is requested in the sacred grove. The ritual preparations have begun, should you—" He trailed off, clearly uncomfortable with mentioning such a personal decision. Hayden nodded. "I'll come." As they left the heart room, the messenger fell into step slightly behind them, head bowed respectfully. But something about his movements, his scent, caught Hayden's attention. A wrongness he couldn't immediately place. He extended his awareness as Thorn had taught him, trying to sense the young wolf's connection to the pack web. It was there, but faint, distorted, as if overlaid with something else, something that pulsed with a sickly violet light in Hayden's mind's eye. Acting on instinct, Hayden spun around, grabbing the messenger by the throat and slamming him against the wall. "Who are you?" he growled, feeling something wild and protective rise within him. The young wolf's eyes widened in shock, then narrowed. For a brief moment, they flashed violet before returning to normal brown. "Clever Omega," he hissed, his voice distorted, no longer his own. "The Eclipse sees all, knows all. Even now, they prepare your mother for the sacrifice." Ice flooded Hayden's veins. "What did you say about my mother?" The possessed wolf smiled, the expression wrong on his young face. "The ritual requires royal blood freely given. Whose blood do you think will flow if not yours? Elizabeth has volunteered to take your place, should you refuse the bond." Hayden slammed him against the wall again, harder this time. "You're lying." "Am I?" The violet flashed in his eyes again. "Ask her yourself, but hurry, little Omega. Time grows short, and the Eclipse grows hungry." Before Hayden could respond, the young wolf convulsed violently, foam bubbling from his lips. His eyes rolled back, the violet glow fading as his body went limp in Hayden's grasp. When Hayden released him, he crumpled to the floor, dead. "Eclipse possession," Thorn said grimly, kneeling to examine the body. "They burn through their vessels quickly if resisted. This boy likely had no idea he was being used." Hayden was already moving, racing through the corridors toward his mother's chamber. Fear propelled him forward, the moonstone pulsing against his chest in time with his frantic heartbeat. The guards at Elizabeth's door straightened as he approached. "My mother," he demanded, not slowing. "Is she inside?" "No, Omega," one replied, confusion evident in his expression. "She left with Victor some time ago, said she needed air, a chance to see the grounds before—" He trailed off uncomfortably. "Before what?" Hayden pressed, dread coiling in his stomach. The guards exchanged glances. "Before the ritual, sir. She said she wished to prepare herself as Mother of the Omega." Hayden reached for the bond, for Alexei. Urgency and fear colored his mental call. "Elizabeth is missing. The Eclipse spoke through a spy, said she would sacrifice herself in my place." Alexei's response came immediately, sharp with alarm. "The ritual grove. Meet me there." Without waiting for the guards, Hayden raced through the castle and out into the fading daylight. The sacred grove lay half a mile from the main building, a circle of ancient oaks that had stood for centuries. As he ran, he felt other presences moving with him, pack members responding to Alexei's silent command, converging on the grove. He arrived breathless, skidding to a halt at the edge of the trees. The scene before him froze his blood. In the center of the grove, Elizabeth knelt on a stone altar, her arms outstretched. Victor stood before her, a ceremonial dagger in his hand. Around them, a circle of elders chanted in an ancient tongue, their voices rising and falling in hypnotic rhythm. "Stop!" Hayden shouted, bursting into the clearing. Victor turned, surprise and something else, guilt, flashing across his weathered features. "Omega, you shouldn't be here." "Neither should my mother," Hayden countered, moving toward the altar. "What is this?" Elizabeth looked up, her eyes clear but filled with sorrow. "It's the only way, my son. I failed once, running from destiny. I won't fail again." "What are you talking about?" Hayden demanded, reaching for her. A barrier of energy stopped his hand, invisible but impenetrable. The circle of elders continued their chant, maintaining the barrier with their combined will. "The ritual requires royal blood freely given," Victor explained, his voice heavy. "If you refuse the bond, the prophecy can still be fulfilled through Elizabeth. Her sacrifice would empower the Moonstone enough to protect the pack, even without a completed bond." "That's insane," Hayden growled, pounding against the barrier. "Let her go!" "It was my choice. Elizabeth said quietly. "My atonement for 20 years of hiding, of denying you your heritage." "I never wanted this heritage," Hayden shouted, desperation rising. "I wanted you, safe, alive." Alexei arrived then, a contingent of warriors at his back. His silver eyes took in the scene in an instant, fury darkening his features. "Victor, what have you done?" The elder straightened, meeting his Alpha's gaze without flinching. What needed to be done? The Omega hesitates. Time grows short. The eclipse approaches. Without the bond or the sacrifice, we are defenseless. "So you take matters into your own hands?" Alexei's voice was deadly quiet. "Kidnap the Omega's mother for ritual sacrifice without my knowledge or consent?" "You are too close to this, Alpha," Victor replied, his tone respectful but firm. "Your feelings for the Omega cloud your judgment. The pack must survive, whatever the cost." Alexei's gaze shifted to the circle of elders. "Lower the barrier, now." The elders hesitated, looking to Victor for guidance. He shook his head slightly. "The ritual has begun. It cannot be stopped without grave consequences." "I'll show you grave consequences," Alexei snarled, his form beginning to shift, bones cracking as he prepared to transform. "Wait!" Hayden's voice cut through the tension. "There's another way." He touched the moonstone at his throat, feeling its power thrumming beneath his fingertips. The prophecy speaks of royal blood freely given. It doesn't specify whose blood or how much. It doesn't require death. He met his mother's gaze through the barrier. "I won't let you die for me. Not when I can choose another path." Understanding dawned in Elizabeth's eyes. "The bond," she whispered. "You've decided." Hayden nodded, then turned to Alexei. The Alpha had halted his transformation, silver eyes intent on Hayden's face. Through their connection, Hayden felt his shock, his hope, his fierce protectiveness. "I choose the bond," Hayden said clearly, his voice carrying across the grove, not because prophecy demands it, not because the pack needs it, but because it's right, because it's what I want. The words, spoken aloud for the first time, felt like truth, like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. The moonstone flared against his chest, responding to his decision with a pulse of blue-white light. Alexei moved to his side, his hand finding Hayden's with unerring precision. "You're certain?" he asked, his voice low, meant for Hayden alone. "This isn't just to save your mother?" Hayden met his gaze directly. "She's part of it," he admitted, "but not all. Not even most. I've spent my life following orders, fighting other people's battles. This time, I choose my own path, and that path leads to you." The naked joy that flashed across Alexei's face was worth any price, any sacrifice. The Alpha turned to Victor, his authority absolute. "Lower the barrier, release Elizabeth. The bond will be completed tonight, under the waxing moon. The proper way, with proper preparation." For a moment, it seemed Victor might refuse. Then, slowly, he nodded to the elders. The chanting ceased, and the barrier dissolved like mist in morning sun. Hayden rushed forward, gathering his mother in his arms. She was pale but unharmed, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "My brave, beautiful boy," she whispered. "I'm so proud of you." "No more sacrifices," he told her firmly. "We face this together, all of us." As they left the grove, Hayden felt the tether between himself and Alexei pulse with new strength, new purpose. Tonight, that tether would become an unbreakable bond. Tonight, he would fully embrace the heritage he'd never known was his. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, it filled him with a calm certainty he'd never known before. Whatever came with tomorrow's eclipse, whatever the council had planned, they would face it together. Not Alpha and Omega, not king and consort, but equals, partners in all things. The moonstone warmed against his skin, as if approving his decision, as if welcoming him, finally, home. Night descended on Silver Blood territory, the waning moon hanging bright in a sky strewn with stars. From the highest tower of the castle to the farthest reaches of the forest, preparations were underway. Warriors checked weapons and armor. Healers prepared bandages and salves, Elders told ancient tales of past victories to steady young hearts. In a secluded chamber deep within the castle, Hayden stood before a full-length mirror, barely recognizing the man who gazed back at him. Gone were his worn traveling clothes, replaced by ceremonial garb of soft leather and silver embroidery. The moonstone gleamed at his throat, pulsing gently with an inner light that seemed to grow stronger with each passing hour. "The regalia suits you," Elizabeth said from the doorway. She had regained some of her strength since the incident at the Grove, though her eyes still carried the shadows of her long captivity. "It feels strange," Hayden admitted, turning to face her, "like wearing someone else's skin." She smiled, crossing to adjust the silver clasp at his shoulder. "Not someone else's, your own, the skin you were born to wear, had fate been kinder." Through the bond, Hayden could sense Alexei's presence elsewhere in the castle, a steady flame of purpose and anticipation. The Alpha was undergoing his own preparations, surrounded by elders of his lineage. "Are you certain about this?" Elizabeth asked, her hands stilling on the embroidered leather. "The bond, once formed, cannot be broken, not even by death." Hayden covered her hands with his own. "I'm certain," he said quietly, "not just for prophecy or power or survival, but for myself, for him." The admission felt right, natural. In the days since his awakening, something fundamental had shifted within him. The connection to Alexei, initially resisted, had grown into something he now couldn't imagine living without. Elizabeth studied his face, then nodded once, satisfied with what she saw. "Then it's time. The moon reaches its zenith in an hour. The ritual must begin soon." They left the chamber together, descending through the castle to the main courtyard where a procession had formed. Pack members lined the path to the gates, their faces solemn yet hopeful in the torchlight. As Hayden emerged, they bowed their heads in respect, murmurs rippling through the crowd. "The Omega comes. Look how the stone glows for him, the prophecy child." At the head of the procession stood Thorn and a group of ritual elders, their faces painted with silver symbols Hayden didn't recognize. Among them, to his surprise, was Victor. The old wolf's eyes were downcast, his shoulders hunched with the weight of shame. "He asked to participate," Elizabeth murmured, noting Hayden's attention. "To atone for his actions. Alexei granted permission, but only if you consent as well." Hayden considered the elder thoughtfully. Victor's methods had been extreme, born of desperation and genuine concern for the pack's survival. "He may assist," he decided. "We'll need every willing hand before this is done." Victor's head lifted at the words, gratitude and relief evident in his weathered face. The procession began to move, winding from the castle down a torchlit path toward the sacred grove. Drums beat a slow, steady rhythm, voices raised in ancient songs that stirred something primal in Hayden's blood. Through it all, the tether connecting him to Alexei pulled taut with anticipation, with certainty. The grove had been transformed since the afternoon's near tragedy. Silver lanterns hung from ancient oak branches, casting ethereal light over a clearing now carpeted with white flower petals. In the center stood the stone altar, purified and adorned with symbols of moon and wolf. Beside it burned a fire of aromatic woods, its smoke curling toward the starlit sky. The procession halted at the edge of the grove. Only those directly involved in the ritual would proceed further. Elizabeth squeezed Hayden's hand one last time before joining the elders who would bear witness. "Wait here," Thorn instructed. "The Alpha comes separately. When the moon touches the center of the grove, you will enter together." Alone at the threshold, Hayden felt a moment of doubt, of hesitation. Not about his choice, but about what it meant. After tonight, he would never again be simply Hayden Pierce, former soldier. He would be bound eternally to Alexei, to the pack, to a destiny written in prophecy long before his birth. Through the bond, he felt Alexei's reassurance wash over him like a wave. Not words, but emotion, certainty, strength freely offered. Hayden smiled to himself, drawing comfort from the connection. A hush fell over the assembled witnesses as a second procession appeared at the opposite side of the grove. Alexei stood tall and regal, clad in ceremonial garb that echoed Hayden's own, but with subtle differences. Where Hayden's was marked with symbols of the moon, Alexei's bore the signs of the sun, balance in all things, as the ritual demanded. Their eyes met across the clearing, silver to amber, and the world seemed to narrow to just the two of them. The drums faded, the witnesses vanished, even the night itself receded, until there was nothing but the tether binding them together, pulling them inexorably toward each other. A shaft of moonlight pierced the canopy of leaves, illuminating the stone altar with silver radiance. At that signal, both men stepped forward, entering the grove from opposite sides, moving in perfect synchronization, as if they had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. They met at the altar, the fire's warmth bathing their faces as they stood facing each other. Alexei extended his hands, palms up in offering. Hayden placed his own atop them without hesitation, their fingers intertwining naturally. "Under moon and star, before ancestors and descendants," Thorn intoned, approaching the altar with ceremonial dagger in hand, "we witness the union of Alpha and Omega, of sun and moon, of strength and heart." Elizabeth stepped forward, removing the moonstone pendant from Hayden's neck with gentle hands. Victor did the same for a pendant Hayden hadn't noticed before, a sun disk of burnished gold that had been concealed beneath Alexei's ceremonial garb. "These symbols of ancient power," Thorn continued, "separated for a generation, now return to unity as their bearers unite in blood and spirit." Elizabeth and Victor placed the pendants side by side on the altar. Where they touched, a spark of energy leapt between them, silver blue meeting golden yellow in a flash of light. "Speak your intent," Thorn instructed, "that all may witness your choice freely made." Alexei's silver eyes held Hayden's, his voice strong and clear in the night air. "I, Alexei Volkov, Alpha of Silverblood, choose you, Hayden Pierce, Omega, and royal heir of Silver Mist. I offer my strength, my protection, my very life, freely given until the last star fades from the sky." The ritual words, ancient and formal, somehow carried the weight of absolute truth. Hayden felt them resonate in his bones, in his blood, in the very core of his being. "I, Hayden Pierce," he responded, his own voice steadier than he expected, "choose you, Alexei Volkov. I offer my heart, my loyalty, my very soul, freely given until the last moon falls from the heavens." Thorn raised the ceremonial dagger, its blade gleaming in the combined light of fire and moon. "The bond must be sealed in blood, freely shed, freely shared. Are you willing?" "I am willing," they answered in unison. With practiced precision, Thorn drew the blade across their joined palms, deep enough to draw blood, but not to maim. The pain was sharp but fleeting, immediately overwhelmed by the sensation of their blood mingling between their pressed palms. "Blood to blood," Thorn intoned, placing the moonstone and sun disk atop their joined hands. "Life to life, soul to soul. What is separated becomes whole." The pendants grew warm, then hot, their combined light intensifying until it was nearly blinding. Hayden felt a surge of energy flow through him, through Alexei, through their joined hands. The tether between them transformed, expanding from a slender thread to a torrent of shared consciousness. Alexei's mind opened to him fully, centuries of pack memories cascading through the bond, generations of Volkovs, their triumphs and losses, their loves and griefs. Alexei's childhood, his father's descent into madness, the heavy burden of leadership placed on young shoulders, and beneath it all, a lifetime of loneliness, of duty without companionship, of strength without tenderness. In turn, Hayden felt his own memories flowing outward, offered freely to Alexei. His mother's constant vigilance, his aimless wandering after military service, his search for belonging, for purpose, the emptiness he'd carried his entire life, never understanding its source until now. "The vessels are prepared," Thorn declared, his voice seeming to come from a great distance. The ritual concludes with the sharing of essence, the final union of Alpha and Omega. Through the haze of shared consciousness, Hayden was vaguely aware of the elders retreating, of the witnesses backing away to give them privacy for the final act. Only Elizabeth and Victor remained, standing at the edges of the clearing as guardians and witnesses. The ceremonial fire burned lower, casting intimate shadows across the grove as Hayden and Alexei moved together, guided by instinct older than reason. The physical joining was both familiar and utterly new, their bodies finding a rhythm as natural as the pulse of their shared blood. As the moon reached its zenith directly above the grove, the moonstone and sun disk flared with blinding light. The bond between them solidified, transformed, became unbreakable. No longer separate beings, but a perfect unity of Alpha and Omega, of strength and heart, of protection and nurturing. In that moment of perfect union, the moonstone's power flowed through them both, expanding outward in a wave of silver-blue light that swept across the grove, across Silverblood territory, across the borders to allied packs, and beyond. Every wolf within 100 miles felt the surge of power, the ancient magic awakening after centuries of dormancy. At the Iron-Tooth border, Magnus and his drugged warriors paused in their preparations, feeling the wave wash over them. The violet-eyed Eclipse members controlling them hissed in unison, their forms momentarily destabilizing as the light touched them. "They've completed the bond," the tallest of the Eclipse snarled, its voice distorting into multiple tones. "Earlier than expected. The vessels are united." "It changes nothing," another replied, its violet eyes narrowing. "The blood moon eclipse comes tomorrow. Our power will be at its height. Even bonded, they cannot stand against us." "Unless the prophecy speaks true," a third added, doubt coloring its inhuman voice. "The greatest sacrifice, freely given." "Silence," the leader commanded. "The prophecy is incomplete, corrupted by time and fear. We are eternal. We will endure, as we always have." But beneath its confidence, a sliver of doubt had taken root. The wave of power emanating from the grove was unlike anything they had felt in millennia. The union of Alexei and Hayden, of Royal Alpha and Royal Omega, had awakened something the Eclipse had long thought neutralized: hope. In the grove, Hayden and Alexei lay entwined on a bed of flower petals, the ritual complete, the bond fully formed. Through it, they felt each other's heartbeats, shared each breath as if it were their own. The moonstone and sun disk, now fused into a single pendant of intertwined silver and gold, rested between them, pulsing with steady light. "I feel everything," Hayden whispered, awed by the sensations flowing through the bond. "The pack, the territory, the land itself." Alexei nodded, his silver eyes reflecting moonlight. "This is what it means to be truly mated. Not just two bodies, two souls, but something greater than either alone." Through the bond, Hayden felt Alexei's fierce joy, his wonder at the connection neither had expected to find. And beneath it, a steady current of love, not the frantic passion of new lovers, but something deeper, more fundamental, a recognition of souls long separated, now reunited. "What happens now?" Hayden asked, though he already knew the answer. The eclipse would come with the blood moon. The final battle would be fought. The prophecy would reach its conclusion, for good or ill. "Now we prepare," Alexei replied, rising and drawing Hayden up with him. "The bond gives us power, but the eclipse will not surrender easily. They've ruled from shadow for too long to accept defeat without a fight." As they dressed in their ceremonial garments, now marked with each other's scent, each other's essence, Elizabeth and Victor approached. Elizabeth embraced her son, tears streaming freely down her face. "My beautiful boy," she whispered, "how proud your father would be to see the man you've become." Victor bowed deeply before them both, formal in his respect. "Alpha pair," he acknowledged. "The pack awaits your command." They left the grove together, the witnesses falling in behind them as they returned to the castle. Word of the successful bonding had spread quickly, and the courtyard was filled with pack members awaiting their return. A cheer went up as they appeared, wolves howling in celebration and recognition of their newly bonded leaders. Alexei raised a hand, and silence fell immediately. "The bond is complete," he announced, his voice carrying across the assembled pack. "The prophecy moves toward fulfillment, but our greatest challenge lies ahead. The eclipse comes with tomorrow's blood moon, bringing all their ancient power against us." "We will be ready, Alpha," came the unified response, determination evident in every face. Hayden stepped forward, still unused to the deference shown to him, but accepting it now as part of his new role. "The eclipse believes we fear them," he said, his military training evident in his commanding tone. "They believe the prophecy incomplete, our power insufficient. They have controlled our kind for centuries through that fear. Tomorrow, we show them what happens when wolves remember their true strength." A roar of approval met his words, fists raised in solidarity. Through the bond, he felt Alexei's pride, his approval of Hayden's natural leadership. "Rest now," Alexei commanded the assembled pack. "Tomorrow we face our oldest enemy. Tomorrow we reclaim our freedom." As the gathering dispersed, Thorn approached with a young messenger at his side. "Alpha," the healer said urgently, "scouts report movement at all borders. Not just Iron-Tooth forces, but others. Wolves from packs we didn't know existed, all converging on our territory." "The eclipse summons their puppets," Elizabeth said grimly. "Every pack they control, every wolf they've corrupted." Hayden and Alexei exchanged glances, their thoughts flowing freely through the bond. "Let them come," Alexei said finally. "The more they gather in one place, the more completely we can break their power." "If we survive," Thorn cautioned. "When we survive," Hayden corrected, the moonstone warming against his chest in agreement. They spent the remainder of the night in council, finalizing battle plans, positioning warriors, ensuring evacuations of the young and elderly to the mountain sanctuaries. Through it all, the bond between them hummed with shared purpose, shared strength. Where one faltered, the other supported. Where one doubted, the other reassured. Together, they were more than either could be alone. As dawn broke over the mountains, casting long shadows across Silverblood territory, Hayden stood with Alexei on the castle's highest tower. Below them, warriors made final preparations. Allies arrived from neighboring territories, joined by a common enemy, a common purpose. "No matter what happens today," Alexei said quietly, his hand finding Hayden's with unerring precision, "I regret nothing." Through the bond, Hayden felt the depth of emotion behind those simple words. "Nor do I," he replied, meaning it completely. Whatever fate awaited them with the blood moon, the bond they shared now was worth any price. The sun climbed higher, its light catching on the fused pendant they now shared between them. According to the prophecy, the eclipse would be at its strongest during the blood moon, but so would the bond between Alpha and Omega, between sun and moon, between strength and heart. "The greatest sacrifice," Hayden murmured, recalling the prophecy's warning. "Freely given to break the bonds of endless night." Alexei's arm tightened around him. "Whatever it requires, we face it together." As the day wore on, tension mounted across the territory. Scouts reported massive gatherings at the borders, Iron-Tooth wolves intermixed with others from distant packs, all with the telltale violet glow in their eyes that marked the eclipse's control. By mid-afternoon, the first skirmishes began, small groups testing defenses, probing for weaknesses. Alexei directed their forces with strategic precision, Hayden at his side offering insights born of military experience. Through the bond, they coordinated flawlessly, anticipating each other's thoughts, complementing each other's strengths. As sunset approached, a strange calm fell over the battlefield. The attacking forces withdrew to the borders, forming circles around massive bonfires visible from the castle towers. Chanting rose on the evening air, an ancient language that sent chills down Hayden's spine. "They prepare their ritual," Elizabeth explained, joining them on the battlements. "With the blood moon, they will attempt to draw power from every wolf under their control, channeling it to strengthen themselves. And we should use this time to prepare our own ritual," Victor added, approaching with several of the oldest elders. "The prophecy speaks of the greatest sacrifice freely given. The time has come to understand what that means." One of the elders, a woman so ancient her white hair had begun to yellow with extreme age, stepped forward. In her gnarled hands, she held a scroll so old it threatened to crumble at her touch. "The complete prophecy," she explained, her voice thin but steady. "Not the version passed down through generations, altered by time and fear, but the original words as written by the last true seer of our kind." She unrolled the scroll carefully, squinting at faded symbols inked on yellowed parchment. "When moon and blood combine in one, when alpha strength and omega heart unite, the eclipse's reign shall be undone. But only through the greatest sacrifice, freely given beneath the blood-red sky. Two souls made one must separate, one essence split to seal their fate." Silence fell as the words hung in the air between them. Hayden felt Alexei's sudden tension through the bond, his instinctive rejection of the prophecy's implication. "Separate?" Elizabeth whispered, her face paling. "After the bond is formed?" The ancient elder nodded solemnly. "The bond creates a shared essence, a unified soul. The sacrifice requires that unity to be broken, torn asunder by choice rather than force. One essence split into its component parts, each forever incomplete without the other." "No," Alexei said flatly, his arm tightening around Hayden. "There must be another interpretation." "The words are clear," the elder replied, compassion in her rheumy eyes. "The greatest sacrifice is not of life, but of wholeness. To defeat the eclipse, the bonded pair must willingly separate what has been joined, must choose to live forever as half of what they were together." Hayden felt sick. The bond between them, so newly formed, so precious, would have to be severed. Not death, but perhaps something worse. Eternal life, knowing what had been lost, feeling the phantom pain of connection without ever being able to restore it. Through the bond, he felt Alexei's anger, his denial, his desperate search for alternatives. And beneath it all, a growing resignation. The prophecy had led them this far. Could they reject its final demand, even at such terrible cost? "There must be another way," Elizabeth insisted, taking the scroll from the elder's hands to examine it herself. "Perhaps a mistranslation, a misinterpretation." "There isn't time," Victor said gently. "The blood moon rises in hours. The eclipse gathers its power. If the prophecy offers a way to defeat them permanently, can we refuse it, even at such cost?" Hayden and Alexei exchanged glances, their bond thrumming with shared grief, shared determination. "We need to discuss this," Alexei said finally, "alone." The others withdrew, leaving them on the battlements as the first hints of dusk painted the sky in hues of purple and gold. Far below, the chanting from the borders grew louder, more fervent as night approached. "I won't do it," Alexei said as soon as they were alone, his voice rough with emotion. "I won't surrender what we've found, not when we've only just discovered it." Hayden stepped into his embrace, feeling the solid strength of him, the perfection of their fit against each other. Through the bond, he sent not words but feeling, his own grief, his own reluctance, but also his resolution. "If it means saving our people," he said quietly, "saving your pack, my mother, everyone the eclipse has ever harmed or would harm in the future." "Don't ask this of me," Alexei whispered, burying his face in Hayden's hair. "Anything but this." "I don't want it either," Hayden admitted, his voice breaking. "The thought of losing this connection, of feeling its absence for the rest of our lives, it's unbearable." They stood in silence for long moments, holding each other as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Through the bond, their emotions flowed freely: grief, love, desperation, determination, and gradually, acceptance. "If we must be parted," Alexei said finally, his voice steadier now, "then let it be our choice, not fate's. Let it be our gift to our people, to the future. Not a tragedy, but a triumph." Hayden nodded against his chest, drawing strength from Alexei's resolve. "Together until the end," he agreed. "And whatever comes after, we face it knowing we chose freely." The blood moon began to rise, a massive crimson orb creeping above the eastern horizon. As its light touched the land, a change came over the territory. The air seemed to thicken, to vibrate with ancient power awakening after long dormancy. At the borders, the chanting reached a crescendo. The violet glow around the eclipse-controlled wolves intensified, streams of energy visibly flowing from them toward central points where the eclipse members stood, their inhuman forms now fully revealed in the blood-red light. "It's time," Elizabeth called from the doorway, her face set with grim determination. The ritual must be performed at the height of the eclipse's power, when the moon reaches its zenith. Together, Hayden and Alexei descended from the tower, joined by Elizabeth, Victor, Thorn, and the elders. A small contingent of the most trusted warriors accompanied them as they made their way to the sacred grove, now bathed in crimson moonlight that transformed the white flower petals to the color of fresh blood. "Whatever happens," Hayden said to Elizabeth as they walked, "know that I found what I was searching for. I found you. I found my heritage. I found where I belong." Tears streamed down her face, but she nodded, unable to speak past the emotion choking her throat. In the distance, howls rose, not the proud calls of silver-blood wolves, but something distorted, wrong. The Eclipse forces had begun their attack, crashing against the defensive lines like waves against a shore. "Our warriors will hold as long as needed," Alexei assured the group, his confidence flowing through the bond to steady Hayden's nerves. "We have time to complete the ritual." The grove seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat as they entered, the ancient oaks swaying without wind, the flower petals stirring as if alive. At the center, the stone altar gleamed blood-red in the crimson moonlight, awaiting its purpose. "The ritual requires the bonded pair to stand at the altar," the ancient elder instructed, her voice stronger now, empowered by the sacred space. "The combined pendant must be placed between you. As the moon reaches its zenith, you must willingly separate what has been joined, each taking back your individual essence." "How?" Hayden asked, dreading the answer. "Through blood and will," she replied. "The same knife that joined you must separate you. Your blood must flow separately, no longer mingled, and your will must be absolute. The desire to break the bond must be genuine, though born of sacrifice rather than rejection." Alexei's hand tightened around Hayden's, pain flowing freely through their connection. "To save our people," he whispered, "to fulfill the prophecy." "To end the eclipse forever," Hayden agreed, forcing conviction into his voice. They took their places at the altar, facing each other across its blood-washed surface. The combined pendant of sun and moon lay between them, pulsing with the power of their bond. Thorn approached with the ceremonial dagger, its blade now gleaming red in the crimson light. "When the moon touches the center of the sky," he instructed, "make the cut. Your blood must flow separately onto the pendant. As it does, focus your will on separation, on division of what has been unified." The blood moon climbed higher, its baleful light intensifying as it approached the zenith. In the distance, the sounds of battle grew louder, more desperate. Through the pack bonds, Hayden could feel the strain on their defenders, the casualties mounting as the Eclipse-controlled forces pressed their attack. "It's time," Thorn said quietly, as the moon reached its highest point. Alexei took the dagger, his silver eyes never leaving Hayden's. "For our people," he said, his voice steady despite the grief pouring through their bond. "For the future." "For the end of the eclipse," Hayden replied, offering his palm. The blade cut deep, pain flaring bright and sharp. Hayden's blood flowed onto the pendant, separate from Alexei's, though falling alongside it. As the crimson drops touched the fused metal, a vibration began, subtle at first but growing stronger. Focusing his will as instructed, Hayden pictured the bond between them severing, their unified essence separating back into its component parts. The effort was agonizing, every instinct fighting against the deliberate destruction of something so precious, so perfect. Through the bond, he felt Alexei doing the same, their shared grief almost overwhelming, but their determination stronger. For their people, for the end of the eclipse, for freedom. The pendant began to glow, not with the silver-blue light of before, but with a pulsing crimson radiance that matched the blood moon above. The vibration intensified, spreading from the altar to the ground beneath their feet, to the air around them. And then pain, unlike anything Hayden had ever experienced, tore through him. The bond between them stretched, thinned, began to fray. Every fiber of his being screamed in protest, fighting to maintain the connection that had become so fundamental to his existence. Across the altar, Alexei's face contorted with the same agony, his silver eyes wide with the shock of impending separation. Their gazes locked, a final moment of perfect unity before everything changed. "I love you," Hayden said, the words inadequate but necessary. "Whatever comes next, remember that." "Until the last star fades," Alexei replied, the ritual words carrying new weight, new meaning. With a sound like the tearing of reality itself, the bond between them shattered. The pendant split in two, the gold sun disk and silver moonstone separating with a flash of blinding light. A shockwave of energy exploded outward from the altar, knocking everyone in the grove to the ground. Hayden fell to his knees, the sudden emptiness where Alexei's presence had been a wound too profound for tears. Across the altar, Alexei had also collapsed, his powerful body racked with the same loss. Before either could move, the ground beneath the grove trembled violently. The crimson light of the blood moon flickered, dimmed, then flared brighter than before. From the borders of Silver Blood territory came screams, not of wolves or humans, but something other, something ancient and terrible facing its final extinction. The shockwave of separation energy had radiated outward from the grove like a tsunami, washing over the Eclipse-controlled wolves, shattering the bonds that held them in thrall. As it reached the Eclipse members themselves, their carefully constructed existence began to unravel, their forms distorting as the power that sustained them collapsed. "It's working," Elizabeth gasped, struggling to her feet. "The Eclipse, they're being torn apart." Hayden rose unsteadily, reclaiming the moonstone from the altar. Its light pulsed weakly now, diminished without its sun counterpart. "We need to see," he said, his voice hollow but determined. "We need to witness their end." Alexei nodded, taking the sun disk, and together they made their way from the grove, followed by the others. At the castle's highest point, they could see the battlefield spread before them. The Eclipse forces had fallen into chaos, wolves stumbling in confusion as the violet glow faded from their eyes, the control that had bound them dissolving like mist. At 3 points along the borders, where the Eclipse leaders had stationed themselves, pillars of crimson light shot upward into the blood-red sky. Within those columns, shadowy forms writhed in agony, ancient beings facing their final moments after millennia of parasitic existence. "The sacrifice," Victor breathed, awe in his voice. It worked exactly as the prophecy foretold. As they watched, the pillars of light intensified, then imploded, collapsing inward with a thunderous crack that echoed across the mountains. Where they had stood, nothing remained but scorched earth and scattered ash. "Is it over?" Hayden asked, the emptiness inside him making everything seem distant, muted. "Yes," the ancient elder said solemnly. "The Eclipse is no more. Their power is broken, their essence returned to the void from which they came." Dawn approached, the blood moon setting as the first pale light of a new day touched the eastern horizon. Across the territory, the survivors of the battle began to gather, wolves from a dozen different packs, many only now awakening from years of Eclipse control. Among them, moving with uncertain steps, came Magnus Irontooth and what remained of his once feared warriors. The Irontooth Alpha approached the castle cautiously, his scarred face no longer twisted with malice, but lined with confusion and dawning horror. As he reached the courtyard, he fell to his knees before Hayden and Alexei. "What have I done?" he rasped, his voice broken with the weight of remembrance. "The things I did under their control, the wolves I tortured, drugged, killed." Alexei stepped forward, his face a mask of control that hid his inner agony. "You were a puppet, Magnus, as were many others. The Eclipse used you, as they used wolves for centuries." "But I remember it all," Magnus said, anguish in his eyes. Every act, every choice. How can I lead my pack with such memories? By rebuilding, Hayden said quietly, finding strength despite his hollowness. By helping your wolves heal. By joining with us to create something new from the ashes of the old. Magnus looked up, surprise flickering across his scarred features. You would allow this? After everything? The old rivalries died with the eclipse, Alexei declared, his voice carrying to all assembled. Today marks a new beginning for all packs. No more manipulation, no more shadow control. From this day forward, we stand as equals, as allies, as one united people. A murmur of approval ran through the gathered wolves. Many had been enemies only hours before, driven by eclipse-implanted hatred and fear. Now they looked at each other with new eyes, seeing not rivals, but potential friends, allies, family. The first council of alphas will convene at the full moon, Alexei continued, his natural authority undiminished despite his personal loss. All packs, large and small, will have voice and vote. The old ways of dominance and submission end today. Magnus bowed his head in acceptance, then slowly rose to his feet. Iron-Tooth stands with Silverblood, he declared, his voice steadying, today and always. Other alpha leaders stepped forward, making similar pledges, a new alliance forming in the dawn light, the foundation of a united wolf nation that had not existed in millennia. As the gathering dispersed, Hayden found himself alone with Alexei for the first time since the bond's severance. The emptiness between them yawned wide and cold, a void that could never be filled. So, Hayden said quietly, what happens now? For us? Alexei looked at him, silver eyes holding a lifetime of unspoken grief. We lead, he said simply. Together, though separate. We build the world we sacrificed everything to create. I don't know if I can bear it, Hayden admitted, his hand closing around the moonstone. The emptiness where you used to be. It never goes away, Alexei said, his voice rough with understanding. But perhaps in time it becomes bearable. A scar rather than an open wound. Elizabeth approached, her steps hesitant, her eyes moving between them with concern. The elders have been studying the ancient texts, she said carefully. They believe there may be not a restoration of what was lost, but a new kind of connection. Not the bond, but something that might ease the pain of its absence. Hope flared briefly in Hayden's chest before he tamped it down. What kind of connection? A ritual partnership, she explained, performed on the new moon, when the sky is dark and possibilities are infinite. It wouldn't restore the bond, that sacrifice can never be undone, but it might create a different kind of link. A friendship of souls, perhaps. Alexei's expression remained carefully neutral, but Hayden caught the flicker of interest in his silver eyes. Would it honor the sacrifice we made, he asked, or undermine it? The sacrifice was the bond's severance, Elizabeth said. That cannot be undone. This would be something new, something different. The elders believe it would be permitted within the terms of the prophecy. Hayden and Alexei looked at each other, measuring the possibility against the certainty of their current pain. The new moon is 2 weeks away, Alexei said finally. We have much to do before then. Pacts to heal, alliances to formalize, a council to establish. And we have time, Hayden added, understanding Alexei's unspoken meaning. Time to consider, to decide. Time to heal, Elizabeth said softly, hope in her eyes as she looked between them. In the weeks that followed, the world of the wolves transformed. The Council of Alphas convened as promised, establishing new laws, new customs, new ways of interaction between packs. The Iron-Tooth territory, once forbidding and dangerous, opened its borders to trade and travel. Magnus, working to atone for actions not fully his own, became one of the strongest advocates for unity. Hayden and Alexei worked side by side, their natural complementary strengths making them formidable leaders even without the bond to unite them. The pain of separation never fully faded, but as Alexei had predicted, it gradually transformed from an unbearable agony to a constant, manageable ache. On the night of the new moon, under a sky thick with stars, but no lunar light, they stood once more in the sacred grove. No witnesses this time, no ceremony, no expectations. Just two souls who had been briefly, perfectly united, now seeking a new way forward. "Are you certain?" Alexei asked, the sun disk gleaming in his palm. "This won't be what we had before." "I'm certain," Hayden replied, the moonstone warm in his hand. "Not because it will restore what we lost, but because it offers something new, something freely chosen, not prophesied or fated." They placed the pendants side by side on the altar. No fusion this time, no merging of power, but a resonance between them, a harmony of separate notes creating music together. "Not bondmates," Alexei said, his silver eyes reflecting starlight, "but partners, allies, friends." "Family," Hayden added, the word feeling right. "Chosen family." As their hands touched across the altar, a gentle warmth spread between them. Not the overwhelming torrent of the bond, but something quieter, steadier. A connection born of choice rather than prophecy, of friendship rather than fate. The pendants glowed softly, the silver light of the moonstone and the golden radiance of the sun disk intertwining without merging. A new kind of magic, one the Eclipse had never understood or anticipated. One based not on dominance or control, but on free choice, on willing partnership. As they left the grove, walking side by side under the star-filled sky, Hayden felt something settle within him. The emptiness where the bond had been would never completely fill, but alongside it now existed something new, something perhaps less overwhelming, but in its way more precious for being freely chosen rather than prophetically ordained. The sacrifice had been made, the price paid in full. The Eclipse was gone, their tyranny ended forever. And from that sacrifice, a new world had emerged, one where wolves determined their own destiny, where ancient enemies became allies, where loss transformed into unexpected gain. Not the ending either of them had imagined when their paths first crossed, but perhaps a better one. A world they had created together through their sacrifice, one they would now build together as partners, as leaders, as friends, as family.